IB Nation, welcome back to another edition of the Irish Breakdown podcast. It is Thursday. I was getting ready to say Tuesday. Got another edition of the big show coming up and got a lot to talk about today. Had a show already scheduled to talk about some things. And then, of course, some stuff came up. There's obviously some news that broke today for Notre Dame, some good news for Notre Dame, and we'll dive into all of that good stuff today. Really got a fun show planned. It's going to be fun for me. I hope you guys enjoy what I'm going to talk about as much as I'm going to enjoy talking about it. And so we're going to continue diving into this Notre Dame football team for 2024, but we're going to begin the show talking about Chad Bowden, the latest that came out today, what we've heard from sources and what his plans are, what all this means for Notre Dame. Then we'll dive into some talk about Riley Leonard. I'm going to clarify what we know about his injury and where he's at and what's going on. But then also, I want to dive into how I think this injury situation with Riley Leonard in so many different ways is good. I think if handled correctly, and I have confidence that it will get handled correctly, is going to be a blessing for Riley Leonard, but then also a blessing for Notre Dame because of how it's going to impact Riley Leonard and just kind of how all of that pans out. And then I'm going to dive into the next edition of the offseason overview, which I'm going to try to knock out here over these next couple weeks. And today we're going to talk about the linebacker position. We're going to talk about what was lost, what returns, what's new, what are some key questions. Is this a strength? Is it a concern? At this point in time, heading into the spring practices, and then we'll talk a little bit about the 2024 Notre Dame defensive class. Now, that part of the show may get cut at the end. It just depends on how long we go with the other topics. And then I'm going to try my best to do a mailbag at the end. There are some questions that got in today. Ryan is going to jump into the back end here in about an hour or so and try to star some more questions. So I'm going to do my best to do a mailbag because I know there's a lot you all want to talk about. So go ahead and get those questions in now. Put MB colon and then your question. That'll make it easier for Ryan and I to also go through and find these questions because I know there's a lot you guys want to ask me about. And there's already 5 questions in there already. So we'll get to that. Then, of course, tomorrow we're going to have a recruiting hour, and then we're going to do back-to-back recruiting hours. We're going to have one on Friday and then one on Monday because I'm not going to be available to do a mailbag on Monday because that is the day that they're starting demolition in our house, and we don't get to move into the new place yet, or I won't get into the new location where we're going to do the show yet until Tuesday. So it's going to be a few days before y'all see me. That's why I wanted to make sure we had a mailbag today so I can answer any questions you guys have. Who knows? We may do an impromptu show this weekend. We'll see. Just depends on kind of what my schedule's like this weekend as we finish packing up and getting ready to vacate the middle of our house and the basement of our house, which is unfortunately getting completely demoed and renovated, and not necessarily most of it not by choice. So it's going to be an interesting 6 weeks, that's for sure. But let's dive into today's show. Topic number 1: Chad Bowden has made a decision. As some of you on the message board knew, we talked about this yesterday on the message board. There's been a lot of rumors out there about Chad Bowden, what was going on. So let me just kind of share with you guys where we're at. Number 1, the important thing is Chad Bowden decided he's going to stay at Notre Dame. And for some people, that kind of seemed like a no-brainer. And I can assure you that was not a no-brainer. Here's basically what happened. Obviously, Michigan named Sherrone Moore as their new head football coach. And one of the first things he did was reach out to Chad Bowden and express interest in bringing him on. From what I was told by my sources, it was the general manager was the position that they were looking for, which is certainly a significantly bigger step from where what he has at Notre Dame, where he's just the director of recruiting and has a very narrow focus when it comes to acquisition of talent. And this is more of an overseeing the roster, so to speak, from a recruiting standpoint. A GM in college football is not like a GM in the NFL. In most instances, there's no like contract negotiations and things like that. But just kind of bringing it all together and talking about, just, hey, we need to make sure that – and it's really needed because – you've got high school recruiting, you've got the portal, you've got your own players, leaving through the portal some you want to say, okay, good luck to you. Some you want to try to convince to stay. there needs to be sort of a bringing it all under one umbrella, and that's what more and more teams are doing. And that's the job that Michigan offered Chad Bowden. I was also told that it came with a hefty pay raise, and it left Chad in a very interesting decision because, as you all know, he's very loyal to Marcus Freeman and really loves it at Notre Dame. But at the same time, you know, everybody has their own career goals and ambitions. It was an opportunity for Chad to potentially, you know, take a big step in the world and go play for the defending national, or go work with the defending national champions. And it really was going to come down to, did Notre Dame want him to stay or not? And was Notre Dame willing to do what was necessary to keep him to stay? And it wasn't just going to be about matching the money. Notre Dame had to step up and match up the money, but then also say, hey, look, here's how we value you from the standpoint of what you can bring to this program. And I don't know, right now, I don't know what role he has. I don't know what his, you know, if he's going to keep the same title, but just have more, you know, other, because there's a couple things Notre Dame could do. Number one is they could just kind of keep him the director of recruiting, but then just put other aspects of the program under him and just let people know, like, hey, this is who's in, you know, this is who's in charge of all these different things. The other things they could do is kind of give him a new title. Don't know what that would be. You know, could be director of player personnel, could be general manager, whatever the case may be. And, you know, that's kind of what people are doing. And maybe they create a general manager position, whatever the new role may be. And then he would still have do what he does now when it comes to directing the recruiting, but then there would be other parts of the program that now fall under his umbrella as well. Some of it he was already doing, but now it's just more formal and more official, and now everybody knows that's the guy that's running the show. Because essentially, the way that it is right now, and the way that it has been since he got here. So, for those of you who don't know how, you know, Chad Bowden's necessarily, you've heard about him recently, but you're not quite. He wasn't someone who you were familiar with early on. He was at Cincinnati with Marcus Freeman, and he was Marcus Freeman's director of recruiting for the defense. When Marcus Freeman was hired as the defensive coordinator at Notre Dame, one of the things he demanded, and it was a brilliant move, was to force Brian Kelly. And I don't mean this negatively, because from what I understand, Brian Kelly was on board with it. So I don't want to make it seem like it was twisting Brian Kelly's arm and Brian Kelly didn't want to do it. It was more so, hey, look, this is what I want. Brian Kelly, Jack Swarbrick said, okay, let's do it. But it was basically, you know, forcing Notre Dame to kind of, hey, you're going to have to change how we do things a little bit, because this guy is important for me as my director of recruiting for the defense. So that first year in 2021, Chad Bowden was the director of recruiting on defense, and we saw the fruits of that, right? When I'm pretty sure I'm accurate on this, but when Marcus Freeman was hired in January, officially on January, I believe it was January, and then Chad definitely came in January. Notre Dame had not yet offered Benjamin Morrison, Jaden Mickey, Jalen Sneed, and there was a couple other players that Junior Tuihalamaka was another guy they had not yet offered yet. And so then obviously in Tyson Ford, we've talked about this a lot, was leaning towards Oklahoma. Aiden Gobira was leaning towards Penn State. Josh Burnham was leaning towards Michigan. So then obviously Chad Bowden comes in, and the tide turns with a lot of those things. Of course, Marcus Freeman is the director of all this, right? Like, I don't want to make it seem like, you know, Chad's doing this and Marcus Freeman's reaping the benefits. It's that combination of the two of them. But with having Chad, there's so many things that Chad can do that take a lot of that legwork off of what Coach Freeman does, and he can focus on, at the time, coordinating the defense, coaching the linebackers, and then doing the actual recruiting. And also Chad does a lot of individual recruiting as well. Then when Marcus Freeman was promoted to head coach, obviously Chad Bowden was named the director of recruiting. And we've seen the results of it, right? And so people will, I had, this is a response that somebody had to me the other day in the message boards. And it was a fair response. I'm not criticizing this person, but the comment was, well, they haven't really changed the game. They haven't really, you know, done any better from a recruiting standpoint, because look at where their classes rank. And they talk about this year's class was like 10th or 12th or something like that. But I think that's a very flawed way of looking at it. And there's a lot of different ways to look at the success, because I don't think it's debatable that recruiting has gotten better. And I would advise any of you that have that same feeling, stop looking at recruiting rankings from the standpoint of where they rank, because there's a lot of things that, you know, that there's a lot of context lacking in that. Couple things that I would point out. Number one of the flaws in the recruiting system is it just evaluates the recruits you sign. So if you sign 8 defensive linemen and 1 linebacker, 2 DBs, but 6 of those 8 defensive linemen are super, super highly ranked, and you have a great receiving core and a great quarterback coming in, but your other positions are not having met, you can have the number one recruiting class like Texas A&M did a couple years ago. But you can't field a team with that unit, right? And so what Notre Dame has done, number one, under Marcus Freeman and Chad Bowden, is you're seeing a lot more balanced classes. They're not having big misses. And, we've seen this from Notre Dame. Somebody said, hey, look, the 20 whatever class was ranked really high, and the 2022 class was ranked high. And I'm like, yeah, that 2022 class had misses at this position. The 21 class struck out at this position. I mean, we've seen years in the past where Notre Dame struck out completely at defensive end, and then the next year struck out completely at defensive tackle. We've seen twice in the last 5 or 6 years that Notre Dame struck out completely at safety in a class. And so we've seen these things happen where they have had these big misses. Receiver class is short numbers, and then you have guys moving positions. And so there's been just a lot of holes, even though the class ranking was higher because recruiting was a little bit more spread out in some different areas. Well, now what you're seeing is with NIL, certain programs have kind of upped their game, and they're getting more of the highly ranked kids. And so that's bumping Notre Dame down. But if you compare Notre Dame's rankings to what they've done in the past, it's significantly better. And so I broke this down on the message board, and again, one of the many reasons why it's good to be on the message board, because this sparked a good conversation. But the point that I made is, about it is like, look, you've got to look at more than just where they were ranked. And an example of that is when you look at Notre Dame's ranking this year, some people have them outside the top 10, which I think is just nuts to have this class outside of the top 10. I think this is a top 5 class, and I'll have my own personal rankings coming out here in a little bit. But when you look at the class, you say, well, it only ranks 10th or 12th, and compared to others, there's other ways to look at it. And so this person, for example, was using 247 Sports, and I said, okay, let's look at how 247 Sports grades classes. There's 3 different ways they give some sort of number value to a class. Number one is they'll just do a ranking, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, where it ranks amongst others. 2 is a total point system, and they only count like certain number of players and things like that. And then number 3 is the average grade per player. So if you look at really the 3 classes that Marcus Freeman and Chad Bowden have had a big impact on, 22, 23, and 24, especially 23 and 24, you'll see some interesting numbers. The grade for Notre Dame in those instances is 274.27 in 24, 272.74 in 2023, and 275.44 points in 2022. The average per player ranking is 91.4 this year, 91.77 last year, 91.82 this year. And that's even with what I would argue 7 or 8 players that they are just wildly off on, in my opinion. But the last time that Notre Dame had a class grade any better than Notre Dame's lowest ranking in the 3 years of Marcus Freeman, which was 272.74, which is the 23 class. The last time they had a grade better than that was 2013. That's the Jalen Smith, Will Fuller, Mike McGlinchey, Eddie Vanderdoes class. Malik Zaire, Greg Bryant, Torian Folston. That class had more points. The last time, this goes, and the 2 classes before that did not have as high of a grade either. The 2011 class was Stephon Tuitt, Aaron Lynch, Ishaq Williams. Those guys also did not get to the numbers that this class had. If you look at the average star, any 3 of these classes have had. And this goes all the way back to the 2010 class. And then if you look at the average per player ranking, all go again from 21 to 14. None of them had the grade that any of the last 2 classes had. The closest was 90.78, which is well over half point below what this current class is, or what this current class has per player. And it is the lowest of the last 3 years. The last time you can find one better, again, 2013. And then 2012 to 2010, none of those classes had a higher per player average either. So you can look at the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 type of ranking, but I'm looking at the value of the class, even if you're going to use what I believe to be the flawed system that they use. This is not just true for 247 Sports. If you look at Rivals, if you go back from 2009 to 2021, there was only 1 class that had more points or a higher per player average than the 22, 23, or 24 classes. And the point is, so you understand what I'm saying, none of those classes were as good as any of the 3 classes Marcus Freeman has been a part of, any of them. So it's not taking the number 1 and saying, well, it's better than any of those other. No. You could take the worst ranking of the last 3 years, and it's better than anything they had done from 09 to 21, with one exception. That was the 2013 class. So you could say, well, that class is better than anything Marcus Freeman has done. Fair. That class was very good. It came after the 12-0 season and all that. But it's about stacking classes, right? That's what I say. It's about stacking classes. And if you look at so the 2013 class had a 284.77 points and a 92.30 ranking, but the next year they were down to 260 and only an 89 ranking. And then in 3 of the next 4 years, they only got above 90 once. They only got above 260.44 once, one other time. They were below 250 in 16 and just above 250 in 2017. And from after the 284.77, they never got up to 270 until the 2021 class, which was 270.65. So it's that stacking classes in a row that we've seen change. And a lot of that has to do with Marcus Freeman being the head coach and also partly the defensive coordinator. But another huge part of that is Chad Bowden. And anyone that follows recruiting knows that. And I'm not talking about people who follow recruiting like me or Ryan. I'm talking about you all. Ask Brandon Plensner. I know he's someone who reads a lot of the articles that we put out, that other people put out. Brandon's always consuming recruiting content. And he'll tell you, anytime a kid talks about his relationship with Notre Dame, 9 out of 10 times, Freeman and Chad are often primary names mentioned, or at least will be part of the conversation. He has certainly had a huge, huge impact on Notre Dame's recruiting. And he was a guy that they had to do whatever possible to keep him. Now, would losing him have meant the end of the world? No, it wouldn't have. I mean, they'd still have a program and all that, and there's things they could have done to overcome the loss. But it's kind of like, you lose a great player, you're still going to be okay there, but you're not going to be as good. And that was the fear. Now, Notre Dame doesn't have to worry about that. Now you keep Chad Bowden in place, you keep that team in place that he has as long as possible, and you're just going to keep doing what you're doing, stacking classes on top of each other. And, of course, they're off to a great start in the 2025 class. So this is a big thing. It may not seem like it. It's not an offensive coordinator, no line class or a coach or a strength coach or things along those lines. But the fact of the matter is talent acquisition is absolutely vital. Absolutely vital to success. We've all seen this, right? People complain all the time. You don't have good enough players here. You don't have good enough players there. And the thing is, they're doing all this in this NIL era as well, which is showing that this group of coaches can thrive in that regard. And so being able to keep Chad Bowden on staff is huge for Notre Dame. And it's just another example of Marcus Freeman and the Notre Dame administration stepping up and doing what it needs to do to make sure that this staff is as good as it can be under Marcus Freeman, and that's vitally, vitally important. And it also gives you a win over Michigan, right? I mean, that can't be denied. I mean, this is your director of recruiting who Michigan made a hard run at. And so now anytime you're recruiting a kid and you're going against Michigan, you can genuinely say, I believe Notre Dame is a better place than Michigan. Chad Bowden can say that to any recruit. I believe that we have a better shot at winning a title with you in college than Michigan does. I believe this place has a higher ceiling, or I believe this place can do this, and I believe this place can do that, because he's put his money where his mouth is, so to speak. He got the offer to go run Michigan's program, essentially, from the GM standpoint. He got that pursuit. It was one of the first things Sharon Moore did when he got hired, was to say, we want that guy. And Chad said, nope, I'm hitching my wagon to Notre Dame and Marcus Freeman. And that is huge. That is absolutely huge for Notre Dame. Not only do they keep Chad, but now they can say, hey, listen, other people wanted me. Michigan, the defending champs, wanted me. So when I tell you that we're serious about this place, that I believe in this place, that this is what Marcus Freeman and this coach can do, I'm putting my life on that, right? I'm putting my livelihood, I'm betting my livelihood on that, because I chose not to go with the champs. I chose to stay here because we're going to be champs here. That's a great selling point for Notre Dame. And if Chad Bowden is smart, and I know that he is, he's going to use that, and it's going to be a big part of a sales pitch to recruits moving forward. So big win for Notre Dame. I'm going to move on to the Riley Leonard conversation next. But before we do, folks, do me a favor, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, and share this podcast. And if you've not done so, you should be on the message board, because we put this on the message board as soon as I got the call this morning. This is what's going on, that this was happening. We put it right on the message board. So we've been talking about this on the message board for over an hour. It's just another great reason to be on the message board. So you can find that at boards.irishbreakdown.com. Join today. They have monthly memberships, annual memberships, booster clubs, all types of great options. But you're definitely, if you haven't been on it, or if you've been off for a while, now's a great time to join. You can find that again at boards.irishbreakdown.com. Next, I want to talk about Riley Leonard. I want to get the record straight on, just because I know there's been a lot of different type of reporting out there, and this isn't a shot at anybody. This is just saying, I want to set the record straight about, what's going on and how long it's going to be all out. But this is what I've been told, and by a pretty good source close to the situation. And here's where it's at. This was not a new injury for Riley Leonard. This was simply sort of a cleanup of the injury he sustained against Notre Dame back in October, would have been actually end of September. And this is a 4 to 6 week time frame. I've talked to a lot of different people that have had this surgery, that know about this surgery. It's not a major surgery from the standpoint of, like, there's a lot of risk of it creating problems, or, I mean, it's supposedly a pretty simple procedure that actually is meant to strengthen that area and increases the chances that it doesn't become a problem. It's not something like a torn Achilles or a torn ACL or anything like that. So that's a good thing from what I've been learning about it. 4 to 6 weeks began, I believe he had the surgery last week. So now we're kind of in that 3 to 5 week range. Obviously, he'll be out for part of winter conditioning. He will not be out for all of winter conditioning, I'm told. There are going to be a lot of things he can do. Obviously, he can still work on his upper body. He can do anything that doesn't require him to put pressure on the ankle and foot. I would imagine right now you'd keep him out of everything, but after a couple weeks, you can start ramping up some of those things as well. And then, of course, he will be back for the spring. So I think Brock Bowers had this surgery during the regular season for Georgia. I believe this is what he had. And people have talked about it's what Tua Tagovailoa had. I don't know about Tua. I'm not saying that you're incorrect. I'm saying I don't know if that's what Tua had. I hadn't looked that up. But Brock Bowers this year, for example, had that surgery, and he missed 2 games. That's it. Now, there was a bye week in there, so he would have missed 3 games, but he missed 3 games with that. And if people are correct about Tua, again, I'm not saying that it was or wasn't, but if people are correct about Tua, obviously that cost him the last couple games of that season, but he ended up coming back from it pretty fine. His happened at a different time. And then, of course, we've seen Tua in the NFL has not had any issues with that. So that is the latest with Riley Leonard, but I want to talk about something else. I just wanted to get that cleared up right away at the top. So it's not something that should linger. It's not something that should be a long-term problem. I want to talk about how Notre Dame should handle Riley Leonard this spring because of the injury, and then talk about how the injury, in my opinion, could end up being a major blessing for Riley Leonard and Notre Dame when you look at this upcoming 2024 season. To begin, I wrote an article about this today, and it's funny. This whole thing with Riley Leonard is just chock full of irony. And if you think about, I mean, at the time, Ryan's talked about this. At the time, there was a lot of people talking about how Riley Leonard was battling for that QB3 spot behind Caleb Williams and Drake May. Was off to a pretty good start to the season. Duke was winning games. He was 13-4 as a starter. And if it's not for Sam Hartman converting a 4th and 16, Duke would have been 5-0 and obviously would have been close to a top 10 team. And this is a team that, as I said before, the 3 years prior to Riley Leonard taking over as a starting quarterback, which coincided with the arrival of Mike Elko. It's just not all on Riley Leonard. Duke was a 10-25 football team. Went 9-4 in his first season, lost those 4 games by combined 16 points. And of course, came out this season, were 4-0. They had beaten Clemson. They were, again, a 4th and 16 stop away from beating Notre Dame. And then Riley got hurt at the end of that game. Got rolled up on, I believe, by Howard Cross, fumbles the ball, Notre Dame recovers, game's over. That basically ruined Riley Leonard's season, and it ruined Duke's season. Notre Dame, the Duke was 4-1 at that time. They finished 8-5. That means they went 4-4. And if you go back and watch the Florida State game, even Riley Leonard was a shell of himself, and it was even worse against Louisville when he re-aggravated the injury against Florida State. But he was not even close to 100% against Florida State. But even with that, if you watch that game, it was a vintage Riley Leonard performance, because you have to look at how he played and some of the things he did and how his presence impacted that offense. And they were winning that game when he got hurt, and their offense couldn't do anything once he went out. And then the next week they were just they were bad. So when you look at it and you say the impact he can have had on that offense, they lost that. The irony is Notre Dame cost him the season. And if Riley Leonard stays healthy with some of the games coming up, who knows how he would have played the rest of the way, and would he have considered going to the NFL? Well, if he goes to the NFL, he's not coming to Notre Dame. And would the push for him to stay in college be the same? I don't know the answer to that. But the reason we don't know is because of the injury he suffered against Notre Dame. And so then you fast forward to December, and he's making the decision to come to Notre Dame. So that's the ironic part. But what is this whole thing? How can this whole thing be a blessing? Riley Leonard's sparked a lot more debate among fans than I thought it would. I kind of thought this would have been a no-brainer. Everybody's fired up about the decision. I understand why in some areas. Some of it is valid. People will look at certain parts of his game and say, hey, this is a question mark. People that want to compare him to Sam Hartman, well, Sam Hartman, that's a silly, useless reason. I just encourage you to not use that, because they're two different players. And just because one portal guy didn't do something doesn't mean another portal guy won't either. That's just not how it works. And that's an emotional reaction, not an actual football debate. So if you're using that one, that's a bad one. A better one is breaking down the film and saying, here's some things I like, here's some things I don't like, and some aspects of his game that need to get better. And then I've seen people quote his stats from this season, and I think incorrectly. Well, it's not quoting them incorrectly, but using them incorrectly. People talk about he's a 57.6% passer. Yes, but he completed barely about 41% of his passes in the 2 games he was back after the injury. He was not the same player. If you look at where he was before, he was at about 63% before the injury. He was at 64% last year. This season also, their receiving core had some guys that they had lost from last season. And again, I've said this before, in the 7 games that he played, in 3 of those 7 games, they played a top 5 pass defense: Notre Dame, Clemson, and Florida State. So all those things are part of it. So I could sit here and debate why I think people are misguided for not being fired up about Riley Leonard, but I do think there are some reasons that I would grant you. Say, hey, I understand the hesitation there because of A, B, C, and D. Totally fair. But that's why I think this injury, and if handled correctly, is something that will allow Notre Dame to benefit even more from Riley Leonard's presence, because I think it could benefit Riley Leonard a great deal. Here's what I mean. Riley Leonard's pass game is impactful, but it's not pure. And what I mean by that is this: his production in the pass game is part the arm talent that I believe he possesses. He's got a quick release, can change arm angles. He gets a lot of good zip on the ball, 20 and under. He throws a good deep ball at times, really good deep ball. And of course, he can move around and make plays off platform and off script, and all those type of things make him dangerous, on top of what he can do as a runner. However, there are times when you watch his game where you're like, okay, he's got to make this decision quicker. His footwork gets him into bad spots at times where, his footwork gets sped up or it's not in good rhythm, and he'll miss throws that, you'll see him make 3 good throws in a row that look really good, and then all of a sudden, boom, how did he miss that throw? And you watch the play and you're like, okay, he sped his footwork up, which caused him to step here, but he had to throw there, so he's fighting across his body. That changes your arm angle. That gets you off platform, or off your kind of your normal rotation. It can mess up your release point, which can impact your accuracy as a quarterback. And you'll see those things from Riley Leonard. You'll see where his footwork doesn't always time up properly with where he's trying to go with the football. He was still a younger quarterback in 2022. He was a first-year starter. He was a true sophomore that threw. Let me look and see. He played more than he didn't take a red shirt in 2021. He played the last 6 games of the year, but he never threw for more than 99 yards in that time, right? I mean, and of course he was making plays with his legs, but he wasn't a guy that did a whole lot as a passer in those games. And so you look last year in 2022, which is where most of his work was done, you'd see those young guy issues. Got to pay better timing, needs to make decisions a little bit quicker, needs to be willing to, maybe take some more chances as a passer, clean up the footwork, clean up this, clean up that. We saw that a little bit this year. I actually saw some improvement from Riley Leonard this year, but the offense just wasn't as good this season as it was a year ago. So you look at his game, there's a lot of things about his game that need to be developed as a passer. Not like, oh gosh, he's bad at this and he's got to get good at it. Just normal, 1 year to the next, you got to improve as a player. The problem is when you have a guy like Riley Leonard, who is as impactful as he is, when you get him to your program, the first thing you want to do is let's start to build his game in the area where he's dynamic right now, which is RPOs, read zone, quarterback runs, scrambles, all those type of things. And that can make it a little bit harder to spend the extra time needed to really develop his pass game. Then what you've seen in the past with certain quarterbacks, we saw this with Brandon Wimbush, for example, after 2017, they were so focused on enhancing his pass game that it took away from his run game. Brandon wasn't the same type of impact runner in 2018 that he was in 2017. And a big part of it was because there was a mental block there, in my opinion. And you see this a lot with guys like that, where you beat it into his head so much, stay in the pocket, stay in the pocket, stay in the pocket, stay in the pocket, that it becomes part of what his game turns into. And he loses a little bit of that dynamic ability as a runner to go out and make those plays. And you can still call runs for him, but some of that playmaking ability takes a back seat because you've had to, in his head, convince him and focus on stay. With Riley Leonard, and this is mental gymnastics, but this is how it is with football, and this is how it is with quarterbacks. With Riley Leonard, it's more of an understandable focus in the spring. He knows you're coming back from an injury. We know you can run. That's going to be part of your game. And so what we're going to do is we're going to not focus really a whole lot on the quarterback run stuff. So how do you do that? You in practice, you're going to focus on some of the technical parts of it. So like during quarterback, running back mesh periods, you'll work on the read zone concept. You'll work on the power read concepts. But what you don't do is and you'll even do it during some of your team on air type of periods. But what you don't do is you don't really bring it into the team setting because you don't want to run the risk of him getting his ankle rolled up on or those type of things. You want to protect that ankle. And so what you'll do is you'll not use the run game in those periods. You'll focus a little bit on it in some of the mesh stuff with your running backs, but you let him scramble, but you have a short whistle. But what you do is you back off a lot of the run game stuff with him. And what you do is saying your focus this spring is on we're going to get your footwork right. We're going to get your footwork right in the run game. We're going to get a footwork right in the pass game. And then you focus a lot of the drills and a lot of the practice periods towards enhancing that part of the game. It's the run game mesh, and then it's the pass game stuff. And then what that allows you to do is to keep Riley in his same frame of mind. Again, you can let him run around and scramble, but as soon as he gets out, it's and you let the defense know number 13 in the red jersey, don't touch him, because you already know what he is as a runner. You've got however many, like 19 games of film of what Riley Leonard is as a runner. So you don't need to necessarily work on that. But a lot of the practice stuff can be geared towards getting the mental and technical part of his game down. One of the things that Riley's going to be missing out on right now as he recovers from the injury is that time to go out there and work with the other receivers, to work on the timing, to get on the same page with them. He's not going to be able to do that for probably about another month. So by altering your spring practice this way, you now give him even more reps in practice on top of what he'll get outside of practice to get that extra work in, to get caught up. So those are all things that you can do in practice to focus more and more of your time on the pass game. In my opinion, if you're gonna pass the football 50% of the time, 60% of the time in a game, or you want to be balanced in some regard, you have to overly practice it that way. So when you're doing your team stuff, if you're a 50-50-ish type of team run pass, let's look at where Notre Dame was last year real quick, just to give you an example of where Notre Dame was, just to give you an idea. And it's not so much just pure plays, it's also about just the emphasis on it. But Notre Dame last season had 457 pass attempt or rush attempts. Let's go 457 minus, let's say about 35, about 45. Sam Hartman's 40 carries, and then you have 8 team carries. So those are plays where you're just kind of taking a knee. So you had 409 carries last year, and you had 351 pass attempts last season. So you're about 45% or so run versus pass. That's also factored into the fact that you had 9 blowout wins, and that's going to skew the run numbers up even higher. So when you're in your base offense, you're kind of close to 50-50 when it comes to run production and pass production. So in practice, you need to be 60-40 pass or 65-35 pass in a lot of the things you do, especially early, because the pass game requires a lot more time to get everyone on the same page. There's also a lot of things you can do for the run game where you don't need the quarterbacks and receivers. So if you're doing individual drills, offensive line's down there working on run game. If you're doing 7-on-7, they're down there working on run game, doing inside run. They can also do some pass game stuff, but there's a lot of things you can do. And then when you get into the practice and the game situations every day, in the team settings, you can focus on the run game, but you can focus on your running back run game. And so your offense, you're not taking anything away from your offensive line, but what you're doing is you're focusing more and more and more of your time with the quarterback on the pass game. And that's needed because you've got four new receivers this spring. You've got Chris Mitchell, you've got Jaden Harrison, you've got Cam Williams, and you've got Micah Gilbert. Plus you've got Jack Larson. You've got some new running backs, not just on the roster, but also new running backs in the starting lineup. And then, of course, everybody's now with a new quarterback. Sam Hartman throws the ball differently than Riley Leonard. And so, to me, this focus, which I think is something Notre Dame needs to do, is going to allow the pass game to get caught up a little bit faster than normal, which is a blessing. But I think it also allows you more and more and more time to really focus with Riley Leonard mentally on, let's enhance this part of your game. And then when you get into this summer and you get into fall camp, then you start to get Riley back to some of the quarterback runs as you get closer and closer to the season. You don't take away the scramble stuff this spring other than just the short whistle, the quick whistle, and just making sure everybody knows, stay off the quarterback. So I think this can end up, if Notre Dame does it right, and I think they will, this is something to me that could end up being a major blessing, because if Riley Leonard can just improve his pass game, just a normal amount, he's still going to be dangerous. If he can take an even bigger leap, then, I mean, he's going to be outstanding. I'm already excited about this pickup. If Notre Dame just gets the 2022 version of Riley Leonard, that's it. Just a 2022 version of Riley Leonard, what we've already seen, not announced better. He's going to be more productive because the talent around him is going to be way better. He's going to have a much better defense, much better pass catcher talent, much better running back talent, and the offensive line won't be as experienced as the one he had to do, but it'll be more talented outside of even the one spot where they had an All-American caliber player, Grant Barton. He's not even as talented as Charles Jagasaw. He's just more experienced and more technically sound. So to me, that player alone is a difference maker for Notre Dame. If you get a better version of that as a passer, this offense could be scary good, in my opinion. So that's why I do believe that while this injury is, anytime you have an injury, it's something to be concerned about. Everybody's bodies are different and all those type of things. But if you're smart about how you handle it, he'll be healthy. If you're smart about how you handle it, he can get caught up from a timing standpoint and getting on the same page with his receiver standpoint and learning the offense standpoint. But the other part of it is even bigger. And that is, if you handle it properly and Riley Leonard can make a jump technically and as a decision maker, that's just normal from 2022 to 2024 technical and mental growth, then I think he has a chance to be a special player for Notre Dame. And we've seen 2 transfer quarterbacks for Notre Dame in the previous 3 seasons. One was okay, but didn't pan out as much as we hoped. The other one I thought was pretty good and led Notre Dame to an 11-1 record. I think Riley Leonard has more physical ability than all of them. He's got way more running ability than all of them. He's got more playmaking ability of all of them. He's just not the pure drop back passer those guys were. But if that gap can get closed, then Riley Leonard's going to be a special pickup for Notre Dame. And first topic, obviously Chad Bowden played a role in getting Riley Leonard here. So two really fun topics, but also they're kind of intertwined, but also both give Notre Dame a chance to be really, really good in 2024. So that's it for the Riley Leonard breakdown. We can continue this conversation. If you guys have questions about what I'm saying, you can hit put them in the mailbag or put them in the chat and we'll get to them in the mailbag. But that's why I do believe that this Riley Leonard injury could end up being a blessing for Notre Dame because they may not have gotten him if he didn't get injured. And then also a blessing from the standpoint of if his game can be increased by how they handle it, that's going to be huge for Notre Dame. So I'm going to get to topic number 3 here in a second. I'm going to take a little quick timeout. While I do that, if you guys could do me a favor, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, share this podcast, give us a 5-star review. Greatly appreciate that. And of course, as always, sign up for the message board at boards.irishbreakdown.com. Let's get to part 3 of today's show. And we are going to be doing on these new shows, I'm going to be doing them Tuesdays and Thursdays, these solo shows. One of the topics each day is going to be sort of an offseason overview of the Notre Dame roster. And just it's kind of a look back at what was lost, what arrives, and sort of expectations and questions and concerns and exciting aspects of each position group. And so we did quarterback last week, and this week we're going to talk linebackers. And the first thing you think about is just the narrative, how much the narrative has changed from a year ago to now. A year ago, in these chats, we're trying to convince everyone, hey, JD Bertrand is actually pretty good. We shouldn't be writing off Maris Leofau yet. Jack Kaiser can do some nice things, and no, we shouldn't bench all the veterans and just put the young guys in because these guys bring value. They're going to be better in year 2 and all those type of things. And they were. There was a lot of good things we saw from the linebacker position this year. And it was like all the concerns and complaints that you all had, that we had in 2022 were valid. They were valid. The linebacker play in 2022 wasn't good enough. And like JD Bertrand was solid. I thought he was pretty good. Jack Kaiser had his moments that were really good and some moments that weren't really good. And Maris Leofau largely struggled. And so those things were all true. And we even said, hey, Maris has got to show us. Well, then you come fast forward to 2023, and the linebacker position becomes the strength of the defense. Obviously, JD Bertrand was able to do what he does and just goes out and is the captain of the Notre Dame defense. He has a productive season, racks up a lot, just continued production and just makes a lot of plays and gets a Senior Bowl invite and just has a really, really good season. And I was very happy. It meant a lot to me to watch Riley Leonard, JD Bertrand go out and play in the bowl game. I thought that was a cool moment. Maris Leofau chose not to do that. It's fine. It is what it is. But Maris was a very solid player for Notre Dame this year, very underrated player for Notre Dame. And, I broke down on Tuesday when I talked about the pass rush numbers for the Notre Dame defense this season. I broke down how much improvement we saw from the linebacker position from last year to this year and just how impactful that was. What was interesting is the year before, it was a major problem. Just the lack of ability to put any pressure on the quarterback. I mean, they blitzed a lot, but they just weren't any good at it. And so the numbers are really fascinating. And I'm going to bring them up again here. But last year, the Notre Dame linebackers combined, this is according to Pro Football Focus, combined, your starting three linebackers, Maris Leofau, JD Bertrand, and Jack Kaiser, combined for 31 pressures. In 2020, that's 2022, the starting three for the entire season combined for 31, 15 from JD, 11 from Marist, and then 6 from Jack. And this season, however, they had also 13 hits on the quarterback, by the way. Then you look at 2023. JD Bertrand by himself had 30 pressures this season and 11 hits on the quarterback. All right, I'm going to say that again. Last season, the linebackers as an entire unit or starting unit had 31 pressures on the quarterback, 13 hits on the quarterback, sacks plus hits on the quarterback. So 13 times they contacted the quarterback. That's an average of 1 per game from your starters. In 2023, JD Bertrand by himself had 30 pressures and 11 sacks or hits on the quarterback. Maris Leofau had 25 by himself and 9 hits on the quarterback, and Jack Kaiser had 12 and 6. So you went from 31 pressures to 67 pressures. That's more than double. You went from 13 hits on the quarterback to 26 hits on the quarterback. That's double. And they did not double the number of times they went after the quarterback, I can assure you of that. You saw a lot more improvement from the linebacking core this past season. And just the overall production from the position was really outstanding. And now we're having a different conversation. Last year it was, I hope they replace these guys. I can't wait till they replace those guys. Now it's, you just lost some really good football players, same guys, and how they get replaced is going to largely determine if your defense can continue the success that it had in 2023. And it's, it's kind of interesting how that narrative has changed, and it's changed because of the work that these kids put in. It changed because the feel that they had for the defense, they knew the defense better, and it also changed because Al Golden did some things this year from a coaching standpoint, and then the arrival of Max Bulla, which I think had a big role in that as well, to put these kids in a better position. So they didn't just run the same pressures that they did last year, some at times, but they also did a lot of new things and played to their strengths a lot more. So you've got to now replace those guys. JD Bertrand's gone. Maris Leofau's gone. That's 120 tackles. That's 13.5 tackles for loss. That's 5.5 sacks. That's 55 pressures. That's 20 hits on the quarterback that you have to replace. And your starting middle linebacker was a 2-time team captain. And everyone will say, hey, this is the guy that got your defense set. That this is the guy that ran your defense. Everything ran through him. He made sure everybody was lined up and all those type of things. And you're going to lose that. And that's a big loss. And to me, you could make the case that JD Bertrand, and I'm not sure if it would be my pick, but I think it's worth debating. Is JD Bertrand the biggest loss that Notre Dame had from the 2023 season from the standpoint of the combination of production leadership and just how everything ran through him. Joe Alt's clearly the best player that Notre Dame lost. But you've got a 5-star kid that's kind of ready to step in, and Joe Alt just had to kind of play his position at a high level. He was not like the center. We had to get everybody lined up, or the quarterback, and all those type of things. Audric Estime is a better player than J.D. Bertrand. Cam Hart, I would argue, is probably a better player than J.D. Bertrand. But J.D. Bertrand had so much value as a player for all the things that he brought to the table. You've got to replace that now. And so that's what was lost. And then what returns, however, and this is the opposite side of the coin, is no one on your roster, in my opinion, is going to be able to do what J.D. Bertrand did this season. You're going to do the best you can. You're going to be better at it, but you can't replicate experience at that position unless they decide to move Jack Kaiser there, which I don't think would be a smart move. But even then, Jack Kaiser hasn't played that position before outside of one game, and I didn't think he played all that great in that one game, if we're going to be honest about that. So you're not going to replace that. So what do? You don't try. You don't try to replace it. What you try to do is say, okay, how can we evolve our defense? And that's going to be the question. But what are you evolving your defense around? Well, the good news is you lose a lot of experience and you lose a lot of production, but you are replacing it with really good talent. And that's where this is what good teams do, right? What do good teams do? Yes, Georgia lost players from their 21 title team, some pretty good players. They go out and win it again in 2022. Michigan lost some really good players from their 2022 team. They come out in 2023. They replace those guys. They win a championship. Good teams reload. They don't rebuild. They reload. It just is going to look different. And so what does that mean? When you look at what comes back, obviously Jack Kaiser returns, and I'll talk more about him later. So I'm kind of blowing past Jack now, not because it's insignificant, just because I have him in another area where I'll talk more about him, and I don't want to be redundant. You're also bringing back Jalen Sneed, former 5-star recruit, big-time talent, really got his first chance to get any kind of meaningful action this season with any kind of consistent meaningful action this season. Obviously early in the season, Jalen got a chance to play a lot, didn't play as much later in the year. I don't think I would argue because he didn't necessarily play all that well early in the season. He had some moments, but he also had a lot of struggles, in my opinion. But you come out later in the season, I thought he played better in the bowl game than he did earlier in the season. And so he'll now have a chance to really hopefully make that year 3 jump. I mean, Jalen played 39 snaps as a true freshman, and a big chunk of those came in the bowl game against some of it came against Navy, but a big chunk of it came in the bowl game against South Carolina. This year he jumps up to 231 snaps. So, how does he benefit from that? How does Jalen grow from that? Do we see him evolve as a player? Does he use that experience to fuel himself to be more focused this offseason, to continue to enhance his technical part of his game now that he's got another year in the system? What does Jalen Sneed bring to the table? And where does he play? Do they play him at Rover? Do they play him at Will? Do they move him to both? Is he going to stay in his primarily third down pass rushing role? I believe Jalen Sneed's going to get a chance this spring to win a starting job along with other players, but there's a lot he has to prove. The good news is he's very talented. But I think the first question that I want to see answered this spring is, where does he play? Where do they start Jalen Sneed out? Does he stay at Rover where he played in the bowl game? Does he get action at Will where he played at times during the regular season? He's played both. He can play both. It's just going to come down to where do they feel he is best suited now? Where is his game, his overall game from an athletic standpoint, from a what he does well standpoint, and from a knowledge of the defense standpoint, where does he fit best? And they're going to have to decide that. Obviously, you also bring back your last year's freshman class, which was very talented. You've got Drake Bowen returns at linebacker. You've got Jaden Alsbury coming back at linebacker. And, of course, you've got Preston Zinter coming back at linebacker. And honestly, it's that trio that gives me a sense of I think they'll be okay at linebacker this year. Because you do have Jack Kaiser coming back who can play a couple spots. You do have Jalen Sneed coming back who can play a couple spots. But that freshman class to me has a chance to be really, really special. And there's some question marks about them. And I'll get into that a little bit here as I dive into different aspects of this. But you do return that talent. And Jaden Alsbury this year only played 21 snaps. Drake Bowen only played 74 snaps, but it's about twice of what Jalen Snead played in his first year. And it's 74 more snaps than what J.D. Bertram played in his first year. But he did get some meaningful both of them got some meaningful practice reps this year, obviously, as being part of the second team defensive time. Drake got a lot of action against Stanford. He played 18 snaps against Oregon State. But the other thing about Drake that you have to remember is Drake played a lot of special teams this season. And so while that doesn't necessarily help him to play linebacker per se, he did play 161 snaps on special teams this season. And so the two combined, he had 230 some snaps this season. That's a lot of opportunities to play and to be on the field, meaning running out on the field for the first time is not going to be new for him this season. It's not going to be something to where you look at Drake and you're like, gee, he's just never really been in that spotlight. He has been in that spotlight. He just hasn't played a ton of it at linebacker. But Drake did get a chance to play a lot. Jaden Alsbury also played 40 snaps this year on special teams. So even though he only played, 21 snaps on defense, he did play 40 snaps on special teams this season. He played in the first 4 games of the season. Four of the first 5 games of the season. He played 3 snaps on special teams against Navy, played 10 against Tennessee State, 15 against Central Michigan, and 4 against Ohio State. And then they redshirted him. And he didn't play again until the bowl game. He also played 14 snaps on defense against Tennessee State and then 6 in the bowl game. And so you got a chance to see them both run around. Jaden was productive in the one game he played in the regular season. He played 14 snaps against Tennessee State and had 3 tackles. It's pretty good production. And he was the guy that I actually had ranked higher coming out of high school than Drake. I think they were let me look it up here. I think they were 1 and 2 in my defensive class rankings last year. At the very worst, 1 and 3. Let me just give me a second. I'm going to pull it up here and pull up my rankings from last season because I don't have this committed to memory. Jaden number 1, Christian Gray number 2, and Drake Bowen number 3. Jaden graded out as a top 50 player, had Drake Bowen graded out as a top 100 player. Both had 5-star upsides. Loads of talent there. That alone, that 1-2 punch alone, coming back with Jalen Snead and Jack Kaiser should have you excited about the depth of the linebacker position, but there's more. I had Preston Zinner ranked as a 4-star recruit and a top 150 kid coming out as well. I think I had him as like a 3.5-star, maybe like a barely in the 4-star grade as a junior. I liked some stuff about him, but I liked him, but he came out as a senior. He was bigger. He was more explosive. He was more physical. He was much more productive. His game took a big jump. He's got a really nice frame. He was probably the thickest of the 3 linebackers, at least like visually. Looked the longest and thickest of the 3 freshman linebackers, certainly the longest of the 3 freshman linebackers, to the point where if you ever have need down the road for a Viper, I could see Preston Zinner becoming that guy. And I've said this before, maybe you need another tight end. I'm like, actually, what I would do instead of taking another 25 tight end, unless it's a dude like Lincoln Cure or Nicholas Thompson, I'd see how the linebacker situation works out this season, because if Preston Zinner doesn't force his way into the 2 deep this year, I may sit down and have a conversation with him about maybe moving over to play some H-back, because he could be he's Davis Sherwood with a lot more athleticism and talent. I don't mean to disrespect to Davis Sherwood, but that's the role Jack Kaiser could play, but he'd be a much more dangerous weapon. And, that's the kind of value that I loved about him coming out of high school. So I would not count out Preston Zinner either, on top of Jaden Alsbury, Drake Bowen, and Jalen Snead. So those 4 guys combined with Jack Kaiser says, okay, there's a lot of question marks here. We'll get into those question marks. But, man, there's a lot of talent. There's a lot of talent there. And as somebody just noted in the chat, I had Drake Bowen as a top 100 player, 5-star upside. I had Jaden Alsbury as a top 50 player, 5-star upside. I had Preston Zinner as a top 150 recruit. I had Jalen Snead as a top 50 recruit. Actually, I forget where I had Jalen ranked as far as top 50 or whatever. Let me pull that one up real quick and remind myself where I had Jalen on defense. I had Jalen as the number one player, and I had Jalen Sneed ranked as a top 50 player as well coming out of high school. And so that's three guys that were very highly ranked, but you could make a case, and Andrew Gilmore said this in the chat, and I think he's correct, that Jack Kaiser's the fastest linebacker you have coming back, which speaks volumes about the talent and athleticism that Notre Dame's going to have at linebacker. Talent, athleticism, and potential. But the difference between this group and last year's group, I think this group is even more athletic than last year's group, although I've always said, like, people are like, I'm surprised at how well Maris Leofau and J.D. Bertrand run at the Senior Bowl. We're not. I'm not. That's one thing they could do. Now, can he play in space? Can he get off blocks? Can he do this? That's a different conversation for a different day. But they can run. And so you're going to have plenty of speed, plenty of athleticism, more length overall, and I would argue just much more impact talent. But we went from a proven, productive group to a group built on potential now. And that's going to be the big concern about it. And so when when we talk about what returns, what comes back, and then we'll get into, is this a strength or concern? The answer is yes, it's a little bit of both. But here's what moves the needle a little bit for me. And that is, it's not just those guys. There's also some newcomers. And of course, the one newcomer that we're going to see this spring is Kingston Viliama-Asa. Now, we'll talk more about him than we will Bodie Cahoon and Teddy Rizak because they're not going to be on campus this spring. We'll talk more about them when we get into the preview. But this is why it's so important to stack classes together, because Notre Dame had a really good linebacker class in 2022. It was Jalen Sneed, it was Josh Burnham, it was Kingston it was Junior Tuihalamaka, and it was Nolan Ziegler. Well, Nolan Ziegler is no longer on the team, which is a loss because he had some potential. You moved Junior Tuihalamaka and Josh Burnham to Viper, and you've only got Jalen Sneed left. There's a lot of teams that could struggle to lose that kind of talent at that position. But because you followed that class up with Drake Bowen, Jaden Alsbury, and Preston Zinner, and then followed that class up with Kingston Viliama-Asa and Bodie Cahoon and Teddy Rizak, you're in a much, much better position. I've had some people say, hey, I'm a little concerned about the depth because you don't have enough for 3 deep. What you have to remember is Notre Dame is not a pure 3 linebacker defense. Last season, for example, when you look at the total snaps last year for Notre Dame, Jack Kaiser, who was the starting rover for Notre Dame last season, played 354 snaps. Thomas Harper, who was the starting nickel, played 438 snaps. So just real quick off my head, that is what, about 70, 80, so it'd be 46, 38, about 84 snaps more than Jack Kaiser. So you're really kind of a 2.5 linebacker defense. 8 players for that type of defense is fine because you also, if you're going to count the depth chart for how they actually play, then you have to include Jordan Clark and Micah Bell and potentially Clarence Lewis as part of this conversation as well, because they will play in that spot that is sometimes rover, sometimes nickel as well. So I think the numbers are fine. I think the days of Notre Dame having 10, 11, 12 linebackers are gone because of the way that they play. As long as this defense is the key. You get to 9 or 10, that's the most you're going to have. 8 is fine for me. You'd like maybe one more, but 8 is fine for me. I don't count Kahanu Kia. He could play linebacker. We could end up seeing him go to linebacker, but we're going to talk about him more on defensive line because that's where Notre Dame listed him on the roster is the defensive lineman. So I'll assume he's going to be playing Viper. Now, that could change, and he could come back and play linebacker, but I don't expect a lot from Kahanu this year because he hasn't played football in 2 years. So we'll focus on the guys they have, the newcomers they have. Jaden Alsbury, Drake Bowen, Preston Zinner, Jalen Sneed, Jack Kaiser, very good plays to start for a 2.5 linebacker defense, basically. Adding Kingston, to me, changes the game a little bit because Kingston's kind of a tremendous insurance policy for this Notre Dame coaching staff. Kingston is a kid that physically is ready to play right now. Kingston is a kid that mentally is going to pick things up very quickly. Talk to anyone that knows this kid, his coaches, his family, his teammates, the Notre Dame people. I mean, you talk to anybody, the one thing they'll say, this kid has a super high football IQ. On top of being 6'3", 230, being a good athlete, being physical and all those type of things. Physicality-wise, strength-wise, he should be able to play right away. Athletically, he should be able to play right away. As long as he doesn't get to Notre Dame and put on 20 pounds, he's the kind of kid that can come in and play right away. So what does that mean? Number one, it means you now have another talented player to be part of this conversation about who's going to play. Number two, a kid like him, if Kingston is as good as we hope he is, and we think he can be, it also then pushes the guys in front of him, because it's like we've said, competition is a great thing. You find out who really is or isn't your true competitors. What does the presence of Kingston Viliama-Asa do to Drake Bowen? What does it do to Jaden Alsbury? What does it do to Preston Zinner and Jalen Sneed and those type of players? Does it raise their level of play? If so, great. If it doesn't, if they start pressing themselves, if they don't put in the work, then they get passed up by a talented player. And so to me, those are all aspects of having a player like him helps you a ton. It helps solidify the inside linebacker depth chart wherever you're going to play him, whether it's Mike or Will. I would say right now, if I were starting the spring off and Max Bullen and Al Gold said, hey, Brian, where would you have the linebacker start off this spring? I would have Kingston at Mike behind Drake Bowen. And that's where I would start him. However, the nice thing about it is if you get into the fall and your two best inside linebackers are some combination of Drake Bowen and Kingston Viliama-Asa, or Kingston and Jaden Alsbury, or Drake and Jaden Alsbury, or the three of them, all three can play both spots. That's huge. I think that Kingston can play Mike or Will. I think Drake can play Mike or Will, although I prefer him at Mike. And I think Jaden can play Rover, Mike, and Will. I think Jaden Alsbury can play wherever the heck you want to play him. And I think Jalen C can play Mike or Will, or excuse me, Rover or Will. Jack Kaiser can play Rover or Will. So the nice thing is, because of the versatility that your defense naturally presents by how you play the linebackers, and the fact that all of your linebackers can play multiple spots, even though some are more suited for certain positions, it does allow you a better chances to get your best two on the field together and then to work in different guys. So like I think of like the 2015? I think it was 2015. And Tavon Coney, let me just pull up the numbers because I'm pretty sure I believe it was 2015. Yes, no, it's 2016. Where Tavon Coney doesn't start for Notre Dame. And he comes off the bench that season because he was a freshman in 2015. Actually, no, no, he was a freshman in 2014. But Tavon comes in 2017 or 2016, and he's a rotation player. He doesn't start many games. But if you look at the production that year, he was fourth on the team in tackles that season. And finished with 61 tackles, had 1.5 tackles for loss, really came out and I'm sorry. Scratch that. It was 2017. I'm looking over this and I'm trying to remember what year was his last year. So 2016 was a sophomore year. He comes in, he's part of the rotation. He has 61 tackles. He has 1.5 tackles for loss. He's not a starter, but he has a lot of production. Niles Morgan is a starter. You've got Drew Tranquil is playing a lot of safety. He had 79 tackles. James Onwallo's your rover. You had Greer Martini had 55 tackles. And he was a guy that kind of came off the bench and did a lot of different things. You go fast forward to 2017, and that's the year you really started to see how you can utilize more than just your starters. So you have Drew Tranquil starting at rover. He finishes with 85 tackles. Greer Martini is your starting Will most of the season. He has 75 tackles. Niles Morgan is your starting Mike. He had 92 tackles. Tavon Coney led your team in tackles with 116 and only started a few games because what you had – and he had 12.5 tackles for loss. What you had that season was a player who could do both spots. He could sub for Greer. He could sub for Niles. He could kind of play both spots. Niles could kind of move around a little bit that year as well. But you had 3 inside linebackers that season that produced a lot. Tavon 116 tackles, Niles 92, Greer Martini 75. And then your rover had 85 tackles. So having that kind of rotation is something that I'd like to see more of this season, and I'll get into more of that a little bit later. But it is important that you have players that can play multiple spots, because if Tavon couldn't have played both, then you could have only played him at Mike. And the same thing is true this year. If Drake or Kingston or Jaden Osbury or Preston Zinner or Jalen Snead or whoever's going to be in the rotation can't play multiple spots, then it makes it a little harder to get the kind of rotation that you want. You have a lot more versatility. So there's a lot of talent coming back on this roster. There's talent arriving on this roster. You've got the numbers you need. You've got the length that you want. You have the athleticism that you need. You've got the playmaking potential that you want and need. Now it's about coaching them up and getting them to be able to play. And as I say, you guys know what I'm going to say. You've got to turn the potential into production. That's the key. And so when I ask myself, is the linebacker position a strength or a concern? And we're going to ask ourselves about this with all the positions. My answer is going to be, once again, yes to both. It's a concern because anytime the conversation is geared towards potential and not production, it's unproven, obviously. And we don't know how this linebacking core is going to handle being part of the regular rotation, whether guys being starters, whether guys being next in line. We don't know how Drake Bowen can handle a more full-time role if he earns one. We won't know how Jaden Osbury does. We don't know how Jalen Snead will be. The only thing that we know is Jack Kaiser, but with him, even he may be a bit of an unknown, because we've seen Jack get some spot starts inside in the past. If you remember in 2022, J.D. Bertrand got kicked out of the game at the end of the Cal game for targeting. So he missed the first half of the North Carolina game, and they replaced him with Jack Kaiser. And Jack did okay in that game. And then, of course, we saw him this year against Central Michigan play that position. But he's been primarily a rover. What is his game going to look like if he's primarily a will? So there's a lot of questions about it. But the reason I also say it's a strength is because I fully expect this linebacking core to take a step back from last year's unit from a are you going to have anyone that can be the quarterback of the defense the way J.D. Bertrand was? No, not this year. Are you going to be as consistent from a just doing your job every snap as you were last year? No, I don't think that you will. Is there a chance that this group makes more plays? Yes. Is there a chance that this group is more impactful from a production standpoint, like negative production? Could you maybe be a more stout run defense this year? Yes, because you're going to be bigger, you're going to be more explosive, you're going to be stronger most likely. So there's some areas where you could be better in certain areas, even though you don't have necessarily the technical advancement that JD had, the conceptual understanding that JD had, the ability to get everybody. I mean, JD made people around him better. That's the thing. And so I'm excited to see what this group can do, but I'm also kind of cautious about what he can do. And so it's going to be interesting. The whole thing is going to be very interesting, but there's certainly loads of potential. And we're going to have a lot more to say about the linebacking core moving forward. So before we get done here, I do want to talk about some of the biggest questions and things that we're going to learn and how these questions get answered are going to tell us a lot about how this linebacking core plays. And the first one, and I previewed this a little bit earlier, what are they going to do with Jack Kaiser? If you actually look at Jack Kaiser in 2023, Jack was a very impactful player for Notre Dame in a lot of ways. I talked about how he only had 12 pressures this year, and had 5 hits on the quarterback, which was less than he had last year. But when you break down the numbers, you're like, okay, that's pretty good. He had double what he had last year from a pressure standpoint. But then you look at the numbers and you're like, dude only blitzed 40 times. He only rushed the quarterback 40 times. He had 12 hits on the quarterback. You look at JD. I talked about JD had 30 pressures this year. He blitzed 104 times. And so, the per snap pressure rate for Jack was actually higher, and the hit on the quarterback rate is higher. Just kind of doing the math on my head off top of my head, was higher than the other two linebackers. And then Marist blitzed 129 times. And so that's 3 times as much. So Even if actually it's over 3 times as much. So if you triple what Jack Kaiser had this year on number of pass rushes, he'd have had 120 pressures. That's still 9 fewer than Marist, but let's just go with the triple. And he stays at the same impact rate. He'd have had 36 pressures, which would have been third on the entire defense behind Howard Cross and 2 behind Javonte Jean-Baptiste. And Jack also would have had, he had 5, so he had 15 hits on the quarterback. The only person on the roster that had more than 15 hits on the quarterback is Javonte Jean-Baptiste, who had 16. So again, it's important to look at context on a per-snap basis, how impactful he was as a pass rusher. Jack didn't have as many tackles for loss this season, some of those aspects, but he wasn't in those positions a lot. I'm very curious how they're going to use Jack this year. I would expect, and this is more of a prediction than this is 100% a prediction, and I don't have inside knowledge of this or what they're going to do, but my thought will be is that they'll work him inside early and then make someone beat him out inside and then put him back out at Rover if that happens. But either way, I expect Jack to do both. At the very least, do both. Because let's just say hypothetically that I'm correct and they're going to give Jack a chance to start inside, whether it's Mike or Will. And Will would make a way more sense in certain areas. To me, you're going to want to have times where Jack can be on this field at the same time as whoever the other Wills are. So you still want to play him at Rover. The problem with playing Jack at Will on a more full-time basis is you're going to have the same problem you had in 2021 with J.D. Bertrand. J.D. was a really good player in 2021, and we've said this a million times. J.D. can run. I mean, J.D. as Notre Dame starting Will in 2021 had 101 tackles that season, 63 solo tackles that season, 7 tackles for loss as Notre Dame starting Will. But when did J.D. get in trouble? It was in coverage. He's not great in space, and also he's 6'1", with not very long arms. Well, I would assume, just looking at him, I think Jack's got slightly longer arms, but if he does, it's not by much. It's slight. And I think Jack's faster than JD, but not by a ton. The fact of the matter is he's going to have the same length issues running up the seams, trying to get up under in cuts, trying to play that hook curl zone, trying to play deep middle, trying to run with vertical routes up the seam. He's going to have the same issues running with corner routes into the boundary that JD had in 2021. Because I don't care how fast he is, I don't care how smart he is, he's still 6'1" with not very long arms. And so that's the danger with playing him at Will. At Rover, you're not asking him to do that as much. He can be fast, he can come down and play, he can drop under hook curl to the field, he can play the flats, he can play the screen, he can be your force player against the run. He can do a lot of different things. So I still hope that they're going to play him a lot at Rover. And, he did some nice things at Will in the bowl game, but we also saw in that game that he's not super impactful, in my opinion, inside on first and second down. I would like to see him maybe be more of an inside guy on third down where he can rush him and play man coverage against backs and things like that. But on first, second down, I'd love it if JD's at Rover still. The thing is, however, is somebody's got to show you like, hey, I don't need Jack inside, because the benefit to having Jack inside at Will is he does know the defense. He's the one guy on your roster that could best handle the mental part, the getting people lined up part. And so there's value to having Jack inside in that regard, where he can kind of tell everybody where they need to go and get people lined up. But his game isn't best suited for that. And my fear is that if you play Jack inside exclusively, that you take away some of the impact that he can bring to the table as a Rover on early downs. And so I'm curious to see kind of how Notre Dame plays this. Perfect world, he's still your starting Rover, and then you move him inside on pass downs when you're more nickel stuff. And then when you're in a true nickel defense, you can have him inside as part of the rotation as well. He'll play more snaps that way than he did last year. He'll have chances to make more production, but you're not asking him to be a full-time inside linebacker, because I think that takes away from what has made Jack an impactful player the last couple of years. if you do that. But but all of this is conjecture. It's all discussion. We don't know where Jack's going to play, or at least I don't know where Jack's going to play this spring. And then just because he lines up somewhere this spring doesn't mean that's where he's going to be in the fall. And a lot of that's going to be, the next big question, which is number 2, is who steps up this spring. You kind of know what you're going to get from Jack wherever you're going to play him, but who steps up after that? And a lot of guys need to step up, and I don't know who that's going to be at this point in time. This is a big offseason for Jalen Sneed. He's got some younger, talented players breathing down his neck. What we've seen from Jaden in the first 2 years he's played is he's very athletic. He's very twitchy. He's an explosive athlete, but he's not a real good player when it comes to technical advancement. We saw him miss a lot of tackles early in the season. He hasn't been great when it comes to being assignment correct. In my opinion, we see him miss gaps. We see him, take the wrong angle when taking on blocks, and those type of things you just can't do. And he's going to have to get better at that. I mean, we saw him against Tennessee State miss 3 tackles, missed another tackle against Central Michigan. He's just a guy that has not turned we saw him, same thing in the bowl game, had a missed tackle in the bowl game. He's a guy that has not been able to turn his elite physical gifts into that level of play yet. Can that change in year 3? Don't know. I hope so, but I don't know. The very least, Jalen gives you value as a pass rusher, but you want him to do more. You want him to be able to be a guy that can step in there and say, hey, I can play will, I can play rover, I can be a first, second down linebacker. I'm not just a third down guy. You hope that he can prove that. How does Jaden Alsbury going to do this offseason? He got a lot of work under his belt and practice and scout team and some reps with the 2s and things along those lines. He's going into his second spring. Can he make a jump and push himself into that conversation? You all know I think very highly of Jaden Alsbury as a player. He was probably my favorite recruit in 23 class. I don't know, or 22 class, 23 class. I don't know why. But I just remember the first time I watched this kid, I'm just like, dude, I love this kid's game. I mean, it's so good. He's not long. He's not real tall. He's not real big. Guy's just a heck of a football player. I also think he came to Notre Dame a bit raw technically. And so I think he's a guy that if he has a good year as far as learning the defense, could be a guy that makes a big splash. I'll be real disappointed and honestly quite surprised if Jaden Alsbury is not in the rotation this year. I'll say he's a better football player than Prince Colley was. He is a more instinctive football player than Prince Colley was. And we saw Prince Colley in the rotation in 2022. So I think he is a player in Jaden Alsbury that has a chance to really be a difference maker for Notre Dame down the road. What will he be in 2024? That's the bigger question. Does Preston Zinner step up this offseason if he gets an opportunity? Does Kingston Viliama-Asa kind of step into that role and step up? I don't know that's going to be. They need those guys to do it. And I'll be honest with you, I'm a little concerned about Drake Bowen from this standpoint. I think Drake Bowen could be a really outstanding football player. Everybody knows that. But I'll be honest, I am concerned about him playing baseball this spring. I don't have any problem with players playing multiple sports. No problem with it. And I would never tell Drake, don't play baseball. This is his life. He loves baseball. He loves football. He's got the talent to do both. I understand it. I'm just going to tell you this from my perspective. The position he plays is unique. It's not like wide receiver. It's not like corner. It's not like a lot of positions where I think a guy can play multiple sports. Jordan Faison is going to have a lot easier time playing football and lacrosse than Drake Bowen and still growing his game in football than Drake will be able to do both and grow his game as football. Now, there's a chance he's at almost every practice because of if they've got a game and he's not starting, he can still be at practice. But there's a lot more to it than that. It's also about what kind of film time is he missing by being at baseball practice? What type of extra work that he might otherwise put in if he wasn't playing baseball is he going to miss? That's where my concern is. And then can he make that up in the in the summer and in the fall camp? That's the question I have. I would be more confident in Drake making a big year 2 jump if he wasn't playing baseball. I'm just going to be honest. Now, I could be wrong about this, and I hope that I am, because I would love for Drake to be able to achieve all of his dreams as a baseball player and a football player. That'd be awesome. but I'm just being honest about what my concerns are because he plays Mike linebacker. And remember at the beginning when I talked about all the things you're losing from J.D. Bertrand from a leadership standpoint and a knowledge of the defense standpoint and a getting everybody lined up standpoint, that's what Drake is going to be asked to do. That's the position he plays. And not that he can't do both, it's just a lot harder to do both. Plus, you have to deal with all the academic pieces of it. So I'm concerned about it from that standpoint. If, however, Drake is able to handle it just fine, and again, Drake's a freaky athlete, so for all I know, he's going to be able to handle it just fine. I'm just expressing my concerns. If he is able to handle it, then he's a guy that I anticipate making a big jump this year because I think Drake he's downhill explosive, tackle to tackle, he's twitchy, he's explosive, little bit of tightness at times, but I think his tightness has more to do with the technical aspects than it does he's necessarily tight. I think he can be an explosive downhill player. I think he's got a chance to be a pretty good coverage player. I know a lot of people talk about the sluggo he got beat on in the bowl game, but go back and watch that game. They did that to him like a few other times. They tried to beat him outside on routes early in the game, and he handled it every time. I'm pretty sure, I could be wrong on this. I think maybe JD did it once, but I'm pretty sure that every time they put a running back outside and tried to run a route on them, it was when Drake was in the game. Smart coaching. But he covered the first 3 or 4 of those times and, of course, fell for the slant and go later in the game. It's part of the learning process. I'm not too worried about it. But he's got the range. He's got the athleticism. He's got the physicality. He's got all the tools to be a great linebacker at Notre Dame. It's just, will he be able to do all that while also playing baseball? That's my question. I don't know the answer to that. And so I'm not saying he can't do it. I'm saying I don't know if he can do it. And we're going to find out starting this spring because they need Drake Bowen to be the guy that we all think he can be. Because if he is, he's got the playmaking potential to overcome what you're going to lose from a leadership and a knowledge of the defense, getting everybody lined up. And then eventually, the more he plays, the more he'll be able to be that guy that gets everybody lined up and has the knowledge of the defense. Because it's not that he can't be what JD was eventually. I mean, JD didn't have the knowledge of the defense he had in 2023 when he was a freshman and a sophomore. That came in time, right? It came senior year and redshirt senior year. So Drake's got the ability. I just wonder if he can do it while playing both sports. And I hope that he does. Jaden Alsbury, Jalen Sneed, Preston Center, Kingston. It's going to be a fun spring to watch all these guys. I'm also curious how the rotation is going to be expanded. I do fully expect them to play more linebackers this year. I understand why they didn't play more linebackers last year because there was such a gap between where guys were. I mean, where JD was and where the next Mike was from just knowing the entire defense and being ready to run the defense was not great. And honestly, Notre Dame's defense wasn't on the field a ton this year. And so there wasn't necessarily that need, in my opinion, to have to force yourself into a rotation. I mean, when you look at JD snap numbers this year, they didn't rotate a ton, but JD only played over 60 snaps 5 times all year. I mean, that's not a ton of snaps. I mean, he only played 37 against Tennessee State, only played 41 against Navy, only 41 against Pitt, only 46 against NC State, only 48 against Wake, 49 against Stanford. Then he had 63 against Louisville, 69 against Ohio State, 70 against Duke, 71 against Clemson, and 78 against USC. And so when you look at the numbers, you're like, that's not a ton. I mean, that's not a ton. For example, in 2021, JD played 753 snaps in 2021. So I said this year he played over 50 snaps 5 times. If you go back to 2021, he played over 50 snaps 7 times and played over 40 snaps in all but 2 games, right? And so he played a lot fewer snaps this year because the defense wasn't on the field as much. Just to give you an example, this year the Notre Dame defense was on the field for 809 plays. Last year's 831, so that's 22 fewer plays. But Notre Dame had 9 blowouts, and so that allowed them to get JD off the field more. And same thing with Marist and Jack Kaiser. And so all those guys, played fewer snaps this year. And so that to me allowed Notre Dame to not have to play a deeper rotation. I think this year, however, I think you're going to see them do more of that because there isn't going to be the same gap between the 1 and 2 when it comes to knowledge of the defense. You're not going to see the same gap this year as far as talent and knowledge. And when I mean talent, I don't mean talent like, obviously Drake Bowen had more talent, but just there was just not the need to put another guy in there to get something that you weren't getting from your starters is kind of what I'm going for with that one. When you also look at the fact that they didn't have the knowledge of the defense that the other guys did. So I expect them to play at least 4 linebackers this year. I could see it going to 5 this season as far as just normal game rotation. How will that be expanded? That's something I want to see. And then also, how are they going to adapt the defense, if at all? Because you don't have J.D. Bertrand, you don't have Maris Leofau. You have different players with different strengths. How are they going to adapt the linebacker position? And then how's Al Golden going to adjust to a younger roster? Last year, Notre Dame had 10 players in the starting lineup that were seniors or older. The only exception was Benjamin Morrison. You had 2 true seniors, a 5th-year senior, and a 6th-year senior on the defensive line. You had 3 5th-year seniors at linebacker. You had a 5th-year senior at field corner, a 6th-year senior at safety, and a true senior at the other safety spot. You're going to be a lot younger this year, especially at linebacker. You're going to have a 6th-year senior, Jack Kaiser. And then after that, it's a redshirt sophomore, a true sophomore, a couple redshirt freshmen, and then true freshmen. Way different experience level with this group. You are not a smart coach if you say, I know that you're not, you're a 2nd-year player, but I need you to do everything that J.D. Bertrand did last year. I don't know that that's necessarily fair to ask, and I think you're setting your players up to fail. So to me, you got to adjust to having younger players at this position. And I expect them to. Al Golden's a smart guy. He didn't get to this point in his life by not being smart. I think he'll adapt. That doesn't mean you don't demand a lot from them, and you're trying to build him to the point where he can handle all that. But you don't necessarily say, hey, last year we could run 17 pressure packages that require the linebackers. This year we can only run 10. Just throwing a random number out there because this is the level that these kids can handle right now. And so there's some different things like that. Last year we had X number of coverage stuff. This year we may change that a little bit, and we're only going to have the linebackers do this because we're younger there. So I'm curious to see how he's going to do that. So overall, to wrap up the linebacker breakdown, there's a lot of talent at this position. There's a lot of inexperience at this position. How this position develops from now until September, or really late August when they head down to College Station, how this position group develops throughout the season then, because they'll get better as the season goes on, hopefully, it could really be the missing link between, is this still a good top 15 type of defense, which I think is the floor for this defense, or can it still be a top 10 defense again, which it was last year, if not top 5, and can they then be that? Can they be that elite? We can compete for a championship because of us defense. I think the linebacker position to me is going to determine that. I think they're going to be great up front. I think the secondary has a chance to be even better this season, at the very least, just as good. The linebacker position is the one that could take a big step back, or it could be just as impactful, just in a different way. There's also a small chance that the young players emerge, they grow, they develop. Al Golden does a great job of building the defense around where they are, and he allows their athleticism and their talent to take over, and there's nobody good enough to expose their youth. That is where they can take an even bigger step. We're going to find out which one that is. So all the questions, all the talent, we went through all of that stuff. This is an important position for Notre Dame, and that's why I wanted to talk about it first, because this is the biggest unknown about this team. But the exciting part is there's so much talent. That's the awesome thing. I'm going to make an executive decision here, folks. I am not going to go through the breakdown of the 2024 defensive class. I'm going to try to do that next week. We're already over an hour and a half into this show. and there's some questions in there that I want to get to and answer, and some discussion that we'll have here as we move forward as well. So I really appreciate all the questions. Thanks to Ryan for coming in and starting all those questions so I could just focus on doing the show. So we're going to go to a mailbag next here after I take a little bit of a quick break. But before we go to the mailbag, folks, do me a favor, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, share this podcast with all your friends, not just physically share, like hitting the share button and sharing it, but also let people know. Let people know, about what we're doing here at Irish Breakdown. And then, of course, sign up for the message board right there at boards.irishbreakdown.com. Yes, Tom Spagnola, my dude. Sharing is caring. You nailed it, Tom Spags. You got it, buddy. Absolutely. We are going to dive into our mailbag now, and we are going to have some fun conversation. Lots of good questions, lots of good discussion going on in the chat. And there were some questions that you guys had. So we'll dive into those right now. Coach Koch says, what is your take on multi-sport versus specialized sport for children and development? How old should kids be before they play tackle? All right, Coach, I'm going to handle these one at a time. First of all, what is your take on multi-sport versus specialized sport for children and development? First of all, I think children playing multiple sports, especially at a young age, elementary, middle school, uh, we call it middle school, junior high for all of you, is incredibly important. And it's important for a lot of reasons. And obviously there's the athletic aspect of it. It's good for physical development. My parents wouldn't let me play football as a kid. I played soccer. I didn't necessarily like playing soccer, but I can look back and say that soccer helped me develop as an athlete. It helped me to do different things athletically. Conditioning was important. I had to move. I had to cut differently than I did in other sports. I also played baseball and basketball as a kid, and my parents made me take gymnastics. They made me do all types of things as a kid because they wanted me to experience as much as possible. I had to play the piano. They made me play in the band in middle school. I actually rather enjoyed the band. I played the saxophone, did not enjoy piano very much, but it was good to say, hey, I tried that. So there's a lot of different things that they had us try and do. And then when we got a little older, we could start to narrow things down if we wanted to. And I didn't start to narrow things down until high school. But even then, because I wasn't good enough to play high school basketball. I mean, I was I was pretty good for, the rec league teams in 5th and 6th grade, but basketball was not my best sport. And so baseball, I didn't play until my junior, senior year. I was primarily a football guy. And so, but at a young age, it developed me a lot as an athlete. And I think that it's good for a lot of people. I mean, whatever sport it is, it can be different sports. It doesn't have to be football, baseball, basketball. At the very least, when you're in high school, if you're a football player and you have aspirations of playing at the next level, run track. Even if you're not good at it, run track. You're going to learn things about, technique and conditioning and explosiveness and how important stance and start is, or things that can relate to that. If you're an offensive lineman and your school has wrestling, then you try it out. If, or in the spring, be a discus guy, whatever the case may be. I'm not one of those people that believes playing multiple sports hinders you from being good at your primary sport. Mark Zachary is a guy that Notre Dame desperately wants in the 2023 class. He's starting point guard on the Ben Davis basketball team. James Flanagan is not only broke his dad's school record, I believe, or state record for, I think, what is it, Ryan? It's like discus, something like that. Discus, I believe is what it is. But he's also a really good player on their hockey team. And he's still Notre Dame athlete. There's a lot of guys. Drake Bowen is, the whole part of the conversation with Drake Bowen was county record for discus, Ryan said. But the whole point of it is Drake Bowen's at Notre Dame playing two sports. Now, Drake's an elite athlete, but the point is you could still, at your whatever level you're going to be at, you can still do both. I think the only exception I would make is that there are certain sports like tennis, that golf, which are a different type of sport, where it might be wise if your child shows a supreme acumen for it at an early age, that it might be wise to say, hey, stick to this sport because it is a sport that you can kind of play year round. If your child is a tennis player that shows a certain gift, then okay, lean into that. If the child really enjoys it, there's some advantages to getting specialized coaching and playing in tournaments all the time. And then also, if your child shows a passion or an acumen for a certain sport, you might want to be smart about what the other sport they play is. So, for example, if you're, I think Vince is in the chat. Vince, I think in Indiana, soccer is in the spring, right? Like it is in college, and then, actually, no, soccer is in the fall, like it is in like same as football, I believe. But in college, obviously, it's in the spring. In other states, soccer's in the spring, and then football's in the fall. But if your kid is a soccer player in the spring, it may not be the ideal for your kid to be a football player in the fall because of the physicality of the sport, the type of injuries, and all those type of things. And so, actually, soccer in the fall. No, I'm trying to think. No, I don't know. I don't know when soccer is. But the point is there may be some sports you're playing in the spring where it's not conducive to you playing football in the fall, or it may be not beneficial to you playing football in the fall, or vice versa. And so there's always those type of decisions. But then do something else. If your child is a track kid that wants to do something in the fall, but you don't want to expose them to the physicality of football, that's fine. Have them play soccer. Vince said soccer is also in the fall. I think it might have been maybe as a kid, maybe soccer. I don't know. But so this is a better example then. Your kid's a really good track athlete. You want to have them doing other things in the fall. Have them play soccer instead of football if you don't want to expose them to the violence of the game. So there's all types of things that you can do. And then, like, I had a niece, Layla, who as a kid loved dancing. And I don't just mean like in the living room. I mean, she was she did events and she loved it. And her mom, my sister, wisely had her try other sports. And early on, she didn't like it. But now Layla's playing she's not dancing anymore. She's playing volleyball. She's playing basketball. She's playing softball. And she's kind of fallen in love with these other sports. But it's partly because my sister wisely made her experience those things. Hey, you're going to play this. Just give it a try. If you don't like it, you don't have to play it. And she fell in love with it. And so there's those aspects of it too. But the final piece is, honestly, Coach, it is so good for the development of young people as just people, getting them around others, forcing them into competitive situations, that you learn so many life lessons playing sports. You learn about competition. You learn about adversity. You learn about teamwork. You learn about loyalty. You learn about having the next person's besides you's back in certain sports. Hey, I got to do my job so this person can do their job. There are just so many life lessons that you get out of it. And then just being around other kids is important too. So I think there's a huge, huge thing for that. As far as tackle football, I can just tell you what I believe. I don't think tackle football is needed for kids until they're at the earliest junior high school. There's so many stories of kids not playing football until they get to high school and they're fine. And there's so much like flag football and stuff like that around now that my parents didn't let me play football as a kid. And I remember how I was so mad at them at the time for that. I mean, I'd have not local high school, but local like Pop Warner coaches. Cause Bath, the school I went to, like we all had our own teams, right? I mean, it was the Bath Pop, Little League or Pop Warner, whatever it was. And they'd call the house and try to get me to come play for him. And I remember how excited I was, like, oh, it's the coach from the Cats calling. And my dad would say, no, he's not playing football. And I was so mad at him at the time. But now I look back and I'm like, I'm so glad because I'm not saying it's not beneficial in some areas, but the risk to me does not to me warrant the benefit. And so the reward, I'm just not a big fan of it. I don't think you need it. I think you can learn a lot of bad habits. There's not always great coaching at that level, if we're going to be honest. And so I just I don't think it's needed. And others are going to disagree with me on that, and that's fine. I don't have the medical background. I just know that there's just certain injuries you just don't want a child to have that are of greater risk in football than playing other sports. I mean, your kid can get hurt playing soccer. Your kid can get hurt playing basketball. It's just the violence of football that I just don't think is needed at a young age. And I never asked a kid when I was recruiting them, "Hey, did you play football in junior high school?" If you're good enough, you're gonna get there. I mean, Notre Dame assigned kids who didn't start playing football till Christopher Burgess, I don't believe, started playing football till high school, and now he's going to be playing at Notre Dame, right? So I just don't think it's needed for me. Flag football gives kids enough. I mean, you'd like to. I'd like to see flag football, from what I know of it, be a little bit more structured to be more like real football. But I mean, at that young age, just have fun. That's the biggest thing, is let kids have fun. And I think you can have fun and still care about keeping score and competitiveness and all that. You don't need to get rid of that stuff to have fun. But, there's so many young coaches that, you're trying to just be that hard butt. I couldn't coach at this level, so let me be that bossy, jerky Pop Warner coach. Like, no, man, that ain't it. But does that mean you can't keep score, can't teach kids right and wrong, can't teach kids about competition and all that? Of course you can. And those are the best coach. I mean, you've had a lot of stories of kids that, hey, I had this coach when I was a kid, and he helped instill my love for football, and that's great. But then there's the opposite side of it. So there's just so many risks involved that I just don't. But that's true for all sports. If I have a son, if I had a son, he wouldn't be playing football till at the earliest middle school, at the earliest, and he would play sports year round. And if he gets to the point where he doesn't want to play sports anymore, there comes an age where I would respect that. But you want kids to be active, and I think those things, they bring a lot of benefit, in my opinion. It was a long time to get to that first question. Let's get to actually, we got a couple super chats down here. Got one from Iden Banami. Thank you, Iden. Appreciate that very much. Did Chad have a relationship with Moore prior? I don't know. I know that he had a relationship. Obviously, he worked with Mike Elston for a year, so perhaps that is it. But look, what this boils down to, Iden, is coaches see what's going on at Notre Dame. They know they're losing kids they didn't normally lose to Notre Dame. They know that when they beat Notre Dame for kids, it's a lot harder than it used to be. And they know why that is. Reason number one, Marcus Freeman. Reason number two, Chad Bowden. And then, of course, the rest of the coaches play their role. I mean, obviously, Mike Mickens has a huge role in, why cornerbacks come to Notre Dame. Chad plays a role in that too. And that's good for Mike Mickens, and it's good for Marcus Freeman. It's about the unit. It's about the team. It's not Chad's doing this all by himself, or Marcus is doing this all by himself. The fact is it's a team. It's teamwork. I've reached out to, people around Notre Dame, and I'll ask sources like, hey, great job picking up this kid. Oh, look, man, I had a ton of help, and Chad did this, and Coach Freeman did this, and Coach so-and-so did this. And you constantly hear that because they understand this isn't just about Marcus. It's not just about Chad. It's not just about Mike Denbrock or Al Washington or Al Golden or Mike Mickens. You've got to have that group work, and that's what this staff does a better job of. But Chad's a part of the reason for that, because he helps make sure that everybody's on the same page. Hey, I need you to call this kid today. I need you to call this kid today. I called this kid today. And those are all important aspects of it. But as far as when it comes to the prior relationship, I don't know if that was the case. Raymond Horton. So I don't know what Raymond, I always say Horton. I don't know why I say that. I've seen your name a million times. I keep getting it wrong. My bad. Raymond Hart with a super chat. Chad Bowden equals 5-star talent. You are not wrong. Tyler Evans with a super chat. Thank you, Tyler. Will more college coaches, head coaches, go the NFL more often because of NIL and the portal? I think so. I think so. Look, guys, right now, the system is a mess. It's not just, it's the NIL and portal. I don't think it's as NIL as I've said this a million times. NIL is not going away, nor should it. NIL is a good thing. Players deserve to be able to be compensated for certain aspects of their college experience. I'm going to do a show coming up here at some point in time because I am so sick of all these college football analysts talking about amateurism is dead. I think that's such a shallow, misguided notion. I saw someone who I respect, Ross Dellinger, who I respect as a writer, said, they don't need to dip their toe in the professional model. They need to leap in, feet first. I think that's so sad and misguided. They don't need to kill amateurism. They need to redefine it. They need to protect amateurism in a different form, because amateurism protects players if done correctly. Amateurism does not have to mean players can't get part of the money. It doesn't mean they can't do NIL. It shouldn't mean they can't do NIL. It shouldn't mean that they can't do rev share. It shouldn't mean that they shouldn't have some sort of collective bargaining for a standpoint of what is the piece of the pie that we're going to get, and those type of things. It doesn't mean that they can't benefit from jersey sales and other type of things. It doesn't mean that. But what it does mean is you can't cut them because they're not playing well. You can't trade them, right? That's a professional. You want to be able to, you want Notre Dame to be able to trade players to other teams. You really want that for these kids? They need to protect the academic piece. This notion that we're just giving up on the academic piece because they don't really make kids go to school anyway. How about we fix that? How about we hold accountable schools and programs that don't actually educate their players? Instead of just saying, let's not worry about that and make them professionals. No, redefine amateurism. And until they do that, it's just going to continue to be this. The bigger problem, however, is not NIL, it's the portal. It's the fact that here, because here's the thing. The NIL doesn't have the insane impact it has now if the portal's not the way that it is right now, where it's just open season. There's no punishments for tampering. It's just kids can leave whenever they want. Now they can leave year after year after year. That is stupid. And it shouldn't be that way. And we've got these judges and legislators doing all this crap, and they're part of the problem. Shocker, right? They're part of the problem. They need to figure out, and the dumbest thing too is these schools suing the NCAA. You guys act like you are the NCAA. You guys all demand you got to put a stop to this craziness. So then they say, okay, we're going to put a stop to it. Well, no, not us. You can't come after us. Here's the reality. Every college in the country wants the NCAA to do something about the NIL. But you can't come after us, though. Can't come after us. What the NCAA would be smart to do is to stop all of its pursuits of schools for wrongdoing, because they dropped the ball by not being more clear about what the rules actually were. They need to get all member institutions to say, hey, here's the new rules. We didn't do a good job of setting the groundwork and the foundation for what this looks like. We're going to give forgiveness for all these things in situations like the Nico situation. Now, the Jaden Rashada situation is a different animal, right? So that one I would let kind of continue. But like this Florida, all these, look, we're going to let this slide. We're not going to punish anybody. But from this moment on, everybody's jumping on board for these are the rules and these are the consequences. So fresh start as of February, or let's say you're able to get it past March 1st of 2024. From that point on, these are the rules. These are the penalties. If you tamper with other teams' players, this is the punishment. If you do this with NIL, this is the punishment. Because everybody says they want it. Get people to put their money where the mouth is. We want this, but just not on us. We want you to enforce it for everybody else, but not on us. And now you have governors. Like, we don't have enough going on in our country. We need governors and AGs to worry about NIL. Seriously? Really? I know there's more important things in the state of Virginia and Tennessee to worry about than this. Way more important things. But this scores political points. That's what it's about. And it's sad, but, nobody actually wants anything done in a way that affects them. And it's because it's open season. And so until that changes, yes, you're going to see more coaches leave. Because here's the thing. Right now at the recruiting calendar, there is no time off. I'm a 37, 38, 40-year-old man with kids at home and a wife. In the NFL, I'm not around a whole lot during football season, just like in college. But once the season's over with, what are NFL coaches doing right now? They're not on the road recruiting. They're on vacation. Some of them are at the Senior Bowl. Bring your family and your kids. You go coach. You do this. It's there's certain things that you have to do with the draft, but you're not the primary driver. You watch film. You get time off. Why wouldn't you want to do that? Instead of right now, like Jeff Hafley's thing is, I got to re-recruit my team every year. That's not how it is. That's not at all how it is. That's not a professional model. It's insanity. So until they do something about it, and the problem is they can't do anything about it, because every time they try to do something about it, some judge, some legislature, some governor, some AG, some school cries about, no, we don't want you to fix it for us. We want you to fix it for everybody else. So what, like if the NCAA tries to say, hey, we're gonna chill out, we're gonna shut this portal stuff down, lawsuit. Hey, we're gonna set these NIL rules, lawsuit. Hey, we're gonna punish people for tampering, lawsuit. Because right now, these teams that cheat know that if we just sue the NCAA, we're gonna win, because the NCAA is so despised that they're gonna win. And the model is flawed in so many ways that they're gonna win. So we want changes, but don't come after us. So I don't see it changing anytime soon. And until it does, you're going to continue to see these problems, in my opinion. It's going to continue to just suck in a lot of ways, and you're going to continue to lose good coaches. And it's not just head coaches, it's assistants. Those guys don't get talked about as much, but people are losing assistants as well. There's no doubt. Ken Pluta, it's an interesting one. Based on Rob Hunt's reaction to the Tyler Harker's article, do you think Notre Dame sources should or will start limiting their access to sites that abuse the information and post wrong data just for clicks? That's a dangerous road to go down. I think, look, I think that, number one, Notre Dame needs to be more clear on what their expectations are. There's this weird thing, like Rob Hunt, with all due respect to Rob, he has this thing, well, it's not your job to release medical information. Well, it kind of is our job to cover the team. I mean, we cover the team. You shouldn't get to tell us necessarily how we cover the team to a degree. However, there does need to be sort of a healthy relationship where Notre Dame says, hey, and this is the conversation I had with somebody at Notre Dame. Listen, here's the deal. Here's the reasons why we don't want you to break this medical news that you learned. And I've had this conversation. Hey, I found out about this, and they say, hey, can you hold off on it? So I've had things where, like, look, we're going to let you break it, but can you wait until Friday or, whatever to break it? And there's reasons why. And they're valid reasons why, because it's different than just, hey, I found out that so-and-so is going to be starting at linebacker and they don't want it out there because they want to have a competitive advantage. That's not my responsibility. But when it comes to medical stuff, that's a different animal, because if I report something wrong, if I report that Riley Leonard injured his ankle again or injured his other ankle, and because the retraction never gets the same amount of eyes as the original statement. And so if I go out and a day later I'm wrong and I put out a retraction, that retraction is not going to get seen as much as the original statement is. So there may be some NFL scouts or maybe some coaches that in their head, they're thinking, well, this Riley Leonard guy's got some injury issues. He's had another ankle injury. That's a red flag. When in reality, he didn't have a new injury. He didn't even have a major surgery. This is all part of the healing process of he's coming back. So there needs to be some responsibility on our end. But, look, clearly Tyler and other people thought they had sources. They didn't just make it up. I mean, Tyler didn't go out there and say, hey, you know what? I think I need to get clicks today, so let me put this Riley Leonard thing out there. I don't think Tyler did that. Do I think Tyler posted what he posted? Did I think if he worked for me, he wouldn't have posted that story? I promise you that. But it doesn't work for me. He's doing what his bosses are asking him to do. So I don't agree with it. I don't think he should have done it. I think he was incorrect in what he said. I think I don't know the process he went through to post it, but I think it was flawed because the information was incorrect. And that's dangerous when it comes to injuries. Do I think that Notre Dame should limit Tyler Horka's access to the team now? No. What I would say is you run the risk of getting shut out from whoever his sources are might stop talking to him, but or people that are more in the know may stop talking to him. If you do that too often, then that may happen. But it's a slippery slope to start saying, well, we're going to limit your access to this, to your site. There are things that you can do that could cause that. I think that there are times Notre Dame does need to use that as a bit of a weapon on certain egregious things. I don't think what Tyler did rises to that level. I think Tyler made a youthful mistake, and I don't think he should have posted what he posted. I don't think he should have done a better job of getting more better sourcing. But I don't think what he did is something that jumps to the notion of, hey, cut this kid off. I don't know if he's done this before. I don't follow Tyler's writing. I've had nothing but pleasant interactions with Tyler at games, and so I have no issue with him. You all know my issues about the site overall, but I have no issues with Tyler and other guys that work there. So I think it was irresponsible. I think it's a lesson for Tyler as a young writer to say, hey, you know what, do better. But here's the thing. I don't think On3 has any issue with what Tyler did because got him clicks. For Tyler as a journalist, I would say lesson learned, and hopefully you do better next time. But I'm just, and I get where Rob Hunt's coming from, but at the same time, we have a job to do as well. And our job is to cover the team. And sometimes that means we're going to be putting stuff out that the team doesn't want us to put out or doesn't like, and you deal with that butt chewing. But that's my job, isn't to protect you. I don't work for you. I work for fans. But at the same time, there's a responsibility that comes with that about making sure that is this worth it? Is the damage worth it? Is if I'm not 100% certain that this is true. Now, here's the thing. If Tyler would have actually posted accurate information, then the response would be a lot different. But I don't believe that he did. And that's my bigger issue with what Tyler did as opposed to him breaking the news. I wouldn't have had him put it out either way. I would have had him go through people at Notre Dame to get things authorized and all that. He didn't. I don't believe he did that. Because if he did, I know who I talked to get legitimate information and get the what was really going on. So I don't think he got it from that person. So I would have just said, learn from it, do a better job. But I don't think there was any maliciousness into what he said or did, and I don't think that there was anything in there that warrants, to me, him or that site losing access to the team. I just think anytime you do that, you always run the risk of your sources drying up. That's the danger. And that's that give and take. Like, okay, sometimes I'll throw you a bone by not reporting this because I have that, that relationship. Now, there's certain things that if I find out something really bad happened, something, that's just morally incorrect or whatever, I have a responsibility to report that. I'll let you know, but I have a responsibility to report that. Like, and most people understand that. I had a coach one time. I wrote an article last year critical of an assistant coach at Notre Dame who I had a good relationship with. And he called me and he said, I don't have a problem with you putting the article. I understand. He goes, I just wish you would have given me a heads up first. And I was like, fair. And so you just got to be careful with that. And so lesson learned, next time I'm going to write an article about that coach that's critical, I'll say, hey man, just look, let's talk about this. I'm going to explain to you why I'm writing it and what I'm writing. And just so because this is what I think and feel, and this is what I'm going to put out. And I think most coaches will respect that, as long as you stick to football in your disagreement, which I did. And so that would be my take on that whole situation. But that's also why you need to be a member of Irish Breakdown, because we do care more about getting it right than we do about getting clicks. Matter of fact, I never put anything out for clicks about Riley Leonard's injury. I waited until I had good sourcing and I was approved to put it out about what the actual injury was, what their surgery was, what the time frame was, and all those type of things. Never actually put a clickbait article out. Didn't tweet. I put it on a premium message board. Didn't tweet the premium link out to get people to sign up for the message board, because there's just certain things that I just don't think should be used for that. And those type of injury, that type of thing is one of those things. But that's why you need to be on the IB message board and a part of what we're doing at Irish Breakdown. Got a question from JP Buellsfeld, my man. Haven't seen you in a while. When I look at the electronic, hey, and I forgot to send you a text, man. I got your card, your gift card. I really, really appreciate that, man. That was super, super sweet. I really appreciate you. And I am a jerk for not having written you back on that. I just hit me as soon as I saw your name. It's been on my to-do list, and I forgot to do it. But it doesn't take away from how thankful I am, JP. I really, really am. When I look at the electronic Wichita, Kansas newspaper, I see a story from the Irish Breakdown staff. That's pretty cool. I didn't know that. I didn't know that. I'll have to look at that. That's pretty cool. Was it about someone from, I would imagine it was about somebody from Kansas, maybe? I'd be curious, like, what article that was, JP. Very curious about that. Brian Swint asks, Brian with a Y, well done on that one to your parents. Will Chad Bowden be the best recruiting job Marcus Freeman does in 2024? Can I go 1A, 1B? I think Mike Denbrock is right on line with that. Best off-field recruiting win, yeah, that's a good one. But I don't think so. I mean, look, to me, I don't think he had to recruit Chad to stay. I think it just was more about let's make sure that we do this right and we make sure that you're valued the way that you need to be valued in the program. So I think the Mike Denbrock one was a little bit better. Nicholas Grosh says, months ago, I suggested Brian Driscoll become Indy's general manager. I don't know who that guy is. BRIEN Is that like Jeff Driscoll's cousin or brother, something like that? I'm not sure who that is, but I know this Brian Driscoll is happy with the job that he has. PK says, thankful that Chad stayed. How many times did a recruit mention his name, either first or second to Marcus Freeman? Notre Dame gives him a greater, more important position. I'm sure that they will, PK. And you are absolutely spot on. I mean, 9 out of 10, I would say, mention Chad prominently, in my opinion. Indy estimates Trucking LLC after the first day of Senior Bowl practice. Is it safe to say Kalen King is maybe overrated? Ricky Pearsall is possibly the best route runner out there. Brendan Rice is pretty stiff and slow. I haven't watched much of the Senior Bowl stuff, so I can't really comment on any of those three based on the Senior Bowl, but I've always felt that Kalen King was overrated. Kalen King's a nice cornerback. I just don't think he's what people make him out to be. He's definitely not as good as Benjamin Morrison, in my opinion. The rest of it, I honestly haven't seen. I haven't watched a whole lot of it. I know Ryan's had some shows that he's put. We are doing this thing. So one of the things we're doing on Irish Breakdowns, we're starting to put out more videos that are only for premium members. And Ryan has been doing every night sort of a recap of the day. But I haven't watched enough of that. I do know that Brendan Rice beat Cam Hart for a goal line touchdown today. It was pretty good coverage, but good ball and just good catch. But I haven't watched a ton of it, to be completely honest with you. Question from Andrew Gilmore. Brian, how much do you attribute those pressures to how good the secondary was at man-to-man coverage? I don't attribute the jump in pressures at all to the coverage because the coverage was really good last year. It was better. The things that I attribute those pressures to is better timing, better design. The linebackers were better at block destruction, and then how impactful the D-line was. You can attribute the pressures to coverage from the standpoint of you're able to pressure as much as you do because of how good your coverage is, but they didn't pressure more this year because your coverage was better compared to last year. They pressured more this year because they were better at it. The linebackers were better at it. So where I would say you're able to pressure this much because of how good the secondary is. The volume of pressures is done because of how good the secondary is. The success is not due to that because they were very good in coverage last year and the pressure packages stunk by and large part. The linebackers weren't as effective at blitzing last year. They didn't get all of a sudden better at blitzing because Notre Dame's corners were better or safeties were better. They were better. The D-line was better. And that's why you saw the jump in pressures. Good question, though. Coach Koch with another one. Are there two players, one offense and one defense, from the 2000 now that could have changed the outcome of the Bama Notre Dame title game? Who would you choose, and could it give them the W? That is a really good question. Offensively, man, I'd go one of two ways. If I could put either prime Quentin Nelson on the offensive line or if I could have put Will Fuller at wide receiver, I think that would have had a big impact on that game offensively. Given Tyler Eifert another weapon, then TJ Jones and DeVaris Daniels become complementary players. That could have been big. And then if you could have put, Quentin Nelson at guard, you would now have Zach Martin at tackle and Chris Watt and Quentin Nelson at guard. That might have made a difference. Would it have been enough for a win? No, I don't think so. I think Will Fuller could have had a bigger impact over there. And then defensively, I mean, the first thing is I would hope that the whole situation that happened that distracted the team doesn't happen. That helps. But if I could say, who else would a player that I would have wanted from other eras, that's my two most likely choices are Harrison Smith or Justin Tuck from 2000 on. Harrison Smith or Justin Tuck are the two that I would probably say I would think most about for that game. Would it have been enough to give him a W? No, I don't think so. But it would have been. It would have been impactful. And then how does that impact the other people around him? That type of thing. Because if you have Will Fuller, then you can use Tyler Eifert in different ways, which maybe makes him more impactful. All right. I got another from Andrew Gilmore. Thank you, Andrew. Andrew asks, Snead is on the clock. I really hope he succeeds. Could he play a strong safety role if he dropped a few pounds? I feel bad that he can't get on the field more. Not at all. No, look, the whole reason he has not been as good as a player so far as his athletic ability is because of the instincts and the lack of technical advancement and assignment correctness. You need just as strong of a feel for the game and instincts at safety as you do linebacker, if not more so with the position he would play. And so at the very least, it's a wash. That's not changing if he's a safety. He's a linebacker. Rover will, either one. He needs to get better at playing that position. And he can't afford to drop that many pounds. He's not that big now. So he's a linebacker. And if he's going to play at Notre Dame, it's going to be in some linebacker role. He just has to get more. He just got to get better at doing the little things. He's got to get better at being focused off the field. He's got to change his attitude to be more bought into what they're doing. He's got to put in the work to know his assignments. He's got to put in the work to be more technically advanced. Jalen's got all the tools. He's just a young kid. He's a freshman and sophomore. Now, to your point, though, now you're on the clock. You're a junior now. There's greater expectations for you now. I don't believe Jalen was an early enrollee. I don't think. So this is only going to be his second spring. So he's entering that period where there's a chance he could take a big jump. And if he takes that big jump, that's huge for the Notre Dame defense. And if he doesn't, then he runs the risk of getting passed up. But yeah, this is going to be a big offseason for Jalen Snead in a lot of different ways. You are correct about that. And then there's another question. Aiden Benami, honest question, not being rude. Has Snead underperformed from our expectations? Were our expectations fair? Yes and yes. I think the expectations were fair. Jalen's an elite athlete who was a highly ranked player, deserved that ranking. Some of the reasons that he has not played yet are due to his high school coaching, and I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean that from Coach Payne and that staff. They had to move him all over because that's what was best for their team. And BJ Payne's primary job when he was at Hilton Head was to win and develop players at Hilton Head, not to do what's best for Jalen Snead to play at Notre Dame. So you had to play him at quarterback, running back, defensive end, linebacker, safety, all those type of things. And that just prevented him from really getting locked in at one position. So, that'll help him now that he's going to go into year 3 at the same position. And, but no, I mean, Jalen C should have been better than what he was this year. I don't have a problem with what Jalen did as a freshman, but he should have been better this year. I think a lot of that's on him. He's got to take that responsibility. He's got to be more mature as a football player. He's got to put in the extra work to get that defense down and know what he's doing. And when he gets those opportunities, make those plays. I mean, there was a play earlier in the year, I think it was against Central Michigan, maybe it was against Tennessee State. It was one of the early games where he comes to on a blitz and he is wide open. I mean, just you're just like, that's the 5-star James. He's just through the hole and then just gets shook in the backfield. Why? Because he came in out of control. He didn't come to balance. He didn't do what he needed to do, just completely whiffed. He's got to be better than that. That's on him, right? I mean, he was wide open to make a big play. The talent is still there. I haven't given up on Jalen Snead at all. It's now up to him to do the work to better yourself and become a better player. That's going to be the key. Joshua Knapp with a question. He says, what does Riley Leonard bring to the table for the future of the quarterback room? I don't know what you mean by Joshua Nip, excuse me. I don't know what you mean by the future of the quarterback room. I mean, I'll give my best shot. It just he's a veteran player that the younger guys can learn from. Leadership wise, how to go about your business, all that type of stuff. That's about it for the future of the quarterback room because he's only gonna be here for a year. Will Indy, Joshua, if I'm not reading your question correctly, apologies. Just if you could elaborate in the chat, and then I'll try to address it if I didn't address it in that answer. I'm just not quite sure how to address that one. Will Indy says, "How can any of the linebackers at Rover get to the level that Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah was?" I'd need to see more from them. I mean, look, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah didn't do anything at Notre Dame until he was a junior. That's what I say. Like, we're talking about Jalen Sneed, and he's got to get better. Jalen Sneed's done a lot more at Notre Dame through his first 2 years than Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah did. He didn't play a snap as a freshman and got hurt. Played some special teams against Michigan and maybe Ball State, and then got hurt and didn't play the rest of the year. So it's never too late, and Jeremiah is a perfect example of that. But so Jaden Sneed could become that. Jaden Alsbury could become that, I believe, at Rover, potentially. Thing about Jeremiah, though, man, he was just so instinctive. But yeah, I could see some other guys getting to that level. That's a high bar, but I could see other guys getting to that level. Andrew Gilmore says, is Jalen Sneed physically strong? He's super athletic, but I'm worried about his strength. Billy Schrouth had a highlight reel block on Sneed last fall. I mean, Billy Schrouth outweighs Jalen Sneed by 90 pounds. And he caught him from the side. That doesn't have anything to do with strength. That has to do with, as far as a lack of strength for Jalen Sneed, that's a 90-pound difference, and you caught him from the side. I mean, that he would have laid out a lot of guys that way. I mean, who was it that Quentin Nelson laid out? It was a bigger player than that. I believe one of the linebackers from Georgia. Does Jalen need to get stronger? Heck yeah, he needs to get stronger. He was a sophomore who was 205 pounds when he showed up at Notre Dame. So is he physically strong? I mean, he's getting there. He's not weak by any stretch of the imagination, but he was a sophomore. Of course he needs to get stronger. Drake Bowen needs to get stronger. Jaden Alsbury needs to get stronger. But I don't think that highlight, and I know which one you're talking about, I don't think it had anything to do with look, if Jalen Sneed was the strongest player on the team on that particular play, he's still getting laid out by Billy Schrouth, in my opinion. Ant VR, do you think it's flawed to use NFL draft projection as a factor in recruits' rankings? I've argued with Bud Elliott and Singer about this recently. They think it should be part of the equation. I don't think it's flawed. I just think it's kind of silly. I mean, if you want to incorporate that into your rankings, fine. I just think it's silly. It's like if a guy goes to college and he's a really good college player, and you had him as a top 50 player, and he goes and he's a really, really good college player, but he's just not a great NFL draft prospect. Does that mean he wasn't a top 50, shouldn't have been a top 50 or top 100 player? I don't think it has anything to do with it. If you were a 5-star recruit and you're a 4-year starter, but you're just not, the NFL draft doesn't view you as a top 35, 50 player, does that mean that you should have been ranked as a 5-star? I don't think it has anything to do with it. I think ranking should be based off of the kind of player you're going to be in college. That's my belief. They can come up with whatever system they want to come up with. I just think it's kind of foolish. And I think the other part of it too is it makes you miss on more kids because you're trying to project to the NFL. Our hit rate on 5 stars is higher than it is on. Okay, sure. Number one, there's fewer of them. And number two, most 5 stars are the obvious ones. Like, do you really need to be a seasoned evaluator of recruits and rankings and have a deep knowledge of the ranking system in order to look at Jeremiah Smith and say that guy's really good? No, you don't. And so I just think that's a flawed way of looking at it personally. I don't know why they do it. I've never had that conversation. I don't really care to have that conversation. I just think that's a silly way of looking at it because it should be about what you do in college. And then let the NFL draft analysts rank guys for the NFL draft. You're talking about taking a 16, like you're telling me. So like right now on 3, I believe. Well, hold on a second. Let me just look on this because we're talking about on 3, but they're all that way, right? So on 3 right now has rankings for the 2025 class, correct? So let me see if they have 26 class. So they have 26 player rankings right now, right? So they have a kid named Jakeem Stewart from Louisiana that on 3 is ranked as a 4-star player. No ranking, but a 4-star player. They're telling me that they're taking some kid's high school film, based on high school film, that they can project this guy to the NFL. That's nonsense. Now, does that mean that this kid may not end up being a top 10 NFL draft pick? Of course he can. But does that mean that they saw him as an NFL player and they just, as a sophomore in high school, and they just knew? Okay, if a kid's that good as a sophomore, you don't have to be very good at your job to see that. You don't. So, it's like CJ Carr is a perfect example. Let's say CJ Carr comes to Notre Dame and he's a great player for Notre Dame. Just runs the offense, has a lot of production, does a great job. Notre Dame wins a national championship, but he's 6'2", he's 210 pounds, he does a strong arm, and the NFL draft doesn't view him as anything better than the 4th-round draft pick. Are we going to look back at CJ Carr's 3 years as a starter and national championship and all the production he had and say, on 3 was right? See, he got drafted 150th overall. They were right. He wasn't a 5-star. Or are we going to say they were wrong because he was a great college player? He just didn't project to the NFL. Like, to me, that just that shouldn't have anything to do with it. That's my opinion. And I don't care a lick about NFL draft projection for high school kids. I care about, can this guy go to college and dominate? Now, guys that can go to college and dominate tend to be guys that go to the NFL and get drafted high. That's the reality of it. You don't need to force that on there because then you fall in love with certain traits that I think can make you miss on certain things, in my opinion. Real Estate 2024, who is bringing up some questions from the Rumble channel, says, do we know ballpark figure numbers that Michigan was offering Chad? Do we know the number figure that Ray's Chad received? I don't know either answer, and don't know that I would necessarily give it if I did, unless they told me they were allowed to. But my understanding, talking to different folks, though, is that it was a substantial offer from Michigan. Do I think Notre Dame had to match the exact dollar amount to keep Chad? No, I think more of the role and the having more say and more oversight of the entire talent acquisition aspect of the roster was probably more important to Chad than the actual salary. But that doesn't mean that salary wasn't important. And I was explaining to somebody yesterday, I was like if you're making $2 million a year and you're a coach and you like where you're at, and some school comes in and offers you $2.5 million, you're like, that's fine. Like, whatever. I'm happy where I'm at. I'm making $2 million a year. If you're making $100,000 at a job and I like my job, but somebody offers me $500,000 to do that, I mean, dude, that's life-changing money. You know what I mean? Like, so it doesn't have to necessarily be a huge offer. I mean, so like when you're making less money, and I don't know what Chad makes, but let's just say hypothetically Chad is making $150,000. Hypothetically, I don't have a clue if that's even close to accurate. And Michigan comes in and offers $700,000. I don't care how much loyalty you have in Notre Dame. That is a huge, huge jump. That is a huge change of your life circumstances for you and your family. And Chad's engaged, and he's going to be getting married soon. He's going to be a husband soon. He has a family he's got to take care of now. You have to take that seriously, and Notre Dame's got to step up. Now, do they need to get all the way up there? I don't know about that, but they gotta get pretty close, in my opinion. So, yeah, I would say it was substantial. I don't know exactly what those numbers were. Tennessee seems like a tantruming child ready to run and run the sport off the cliff rather than face punishment. I agree with you completely. P.S. I believe they did violate enticement rules in big ways. Agree with both. But they also know that the NCAA is very scared. I was watching The Mummy yesterday. Great movie. I've seen it probably 100 times. Love the Mummy. The first two Mummy movies. The third one was with Jet Li was not very good, or at least not as good in my opinion. But I was watching it. You remember the scene when Imhotep is still kind of coming back and he's not fully revived, and like the cat like jumps on the piano and he gets scared. He like goes and turns and sand takes off. Like that's the NCAA anytime there's a lawsuit threatened against them. That's what they know. Like they get scared of lawsuits. It seems like the NCAA is maybe more willing to fight back on this one, but that's why I think Tennessee, they're just trying to punk them like North Carolina did and like other schools have done and with different things, is punk them into not coming after us. It seems like the NCAA is willing to fight this one for now. We'll find out, but I think that's what's happening in my opinion. And probably in knowing, and if you're Tennessee, even if you broke the rules, if you go look at all the rulings that all these judges are making right now, and not even going to get into the piss poor state of the judiciary in our country right now, but they're siding with these teams and players almost every time, even when to me, the arguments aren't strong for that side, they're still winning. And so if you're Tennessee, might as well, right? Might as well do it. But yes, I agree with what you said about Tennessee. Real Estate 2024 has another one. Final one as we get close to this one. He says, my daughter plays flag football with her brother and loves it. Great sport below middle school. I agree. And that's the other thing too, is that at younger ages, you can have more of that type of thing going on. And before like bodies really start to separate between boys and girls, you can have some of that. But you know, whether it's if a girl wants to play football, that's a great opportunity for her to play at a young age. If she's someone who enjoys it, and if you're a young kid who has a chance to play that, I'd go for it. You know, I think I wish they had flag football when I was a kid, because I would have been allowed to play that. My parents would let me play that, but they didn't have flag football when I was a kid, so I couldn't play. We just played street ball and pickup. You know, which is funny because like it's more dangerous than playing with pads on, because we played tackle football in the neighborhood. You know, with no pads. So I still played tackle football. I just didn't play it in an organized standpoint. Ha, Dad. See, I still play football. I'm just kidding. Still didn't tackle as much as we would have in practice. I'm just joking. I know my dad watches, so I'm just giving him a hard time. Salty Virginia Peanut says, should Notre Dame reorganize to unite NIL, portal, and recruiting, fund and staff it up, and would Chad Bowden lead it? I mean, I think that's kind of what I think is going on. Salty is just reading between the lines, I do think that you need to do that. And I think Chad will probably be the person in charge of that, because it all goes together. I mean, it has to be sort of all under one umbrella. You have to have somebody at the top that knows everything that's going on, and then they can kind of distribute down what needs to be done moving forward. And I would assume that that'll be part of what Chad's going to do. Joe Marciano says, what your thoughts on private enterprise buying athletic departments? I don't know what this refers to, Joe, but boy, that's just to me a horrible precedent, in my opinion. Just be a really bad precedent. It's one thing to fund it. Are you saying like buying it? Whew, boy. Justin Knox is true or false? Kingston Viliama Asa starts more than one game this coming season. It's possible. More than one game, it's possible. Yeah, I mean, I'm going to say true just from the standpoint of injury, targeting rules. There's all types of things that could happen that would allow that to come to fruition, even beyond just him starting. I mean, he could do that just by winning the starting job at some point in time. But when you consider, I think at the very least, he'll be the number 2 Mike, and there's a chance of injury or, guy missing a half because of targeting. Like we saw JD Bertrand, missed a game this year because of injury, and then the year before missed 2 games because of targeting. Or the first half of 2 games. So somebody has to start in front of him. I could see that. I'll just say true, just because of that alone. I'll say true, and then go from there. Let me see if there's any other questions that came in here. Yes, thank you, Salty. He says, using Imhotep in The Mummy to explain the action of the NCAA is kind of analysis you only get it from IB. That is correct, because I love movies and I love football. And so, yeah, I appreciate that, man. So let's see here real quick. I think that is going to be it for the questions. Oh, here we go. He says, JP explaining the thing from earlier. When I see your IB articles every day in Wichita newspaper, everyone in the world sees the same article because IB influence, or do I only see the article because they know I am an IB member? I don't, JP, I'd have to talk with you about it, buddy. It could be because, like, I know that there's syndication that Fan Nation and the Arena Group does with our articles, that it'll get like on MSN and different things like that, which then will get linked out to different newspapers. And so it could be that. And then they're going to know, if you have cookies, they're going to see Notre Dame in searches for you. And then that might be it. It could be because we had an article about a Kansas player. And so perhaps the Wichita paper has, certain keywords. Hey, we wrote an article about a kid from Kansas, and that's what they see it. But if it's just general Notre Dame articles, it's probably because of the syndication stuff that we have that then goes to you, that they basically kind of look at the way that they, look at all of our information and know that you're a Notre Dame fan, and because of your search history, and they're going to put it up that way. I would have to know. I'd have to know more about that, but that's most likely it, is that part right there. So, and I think that is going to be it. All right, everybody. Lots and lots of great questions. As my man Andre Tonsel says, please join the Irish Breakdown boards. It's the best thing since sliced bread. I appreciate you, Andre, very, 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 very much. Hit that like button, folks. Hit the subscribe button. Hit the notification bell. Share this podcast. Give us a 5-star review. And as Andre said, folks, please join the message board at boards.irishbreakdown.com. Great conversation. Intel. We have a lot of things planned here moving forward for content that will be message board only. I think you all will love it. I'm going to be back on Tuesday. Next time you'll see me, most likely will be on Tuesday. We may have some things come up this weekend. I'm going to have some time, but Ryan and Sean will be back tomorrow for a Notre Dame recruiting hour, and then they'll have another recruiting hour on Monday. So we'll move the mailbag to next Friday. Then I'll be back for a solo show on Tuesday. It's going to be a lot of fun. Anyway, have a great rest of your day, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me today on the Irish Breakdown Podcast.